Okay, by my clock, it is about 9:30. So I think I'm going to um, invite our experts and city staff to join into the meeting now. And we will get started by kind of setting up the expectations of what's going to happen over the next, what's it, 2.5 hours. So just a reminder for everybody, I'll read this for those who can't see it. Open house is beginning at 9:30. All participants will be muted upon joining the meeting. Instructions for asking a question or making a comment will be provided here in a few seconds here. So let's move on to the next screen. Quick introductions. These are the people who you will be potentially hearing from today. From the city, there's me, Robert Burke, AMPAC Chair, and Mark Opitz, City Planner. We have Josh Holbrook from the Wisconsin Bureau of Aeronautics joining us. And then from Mead and Hunt, we have a variety of technical experts. We have Greg Stern, Rick Dunkelberg, Laura Moreland, Barbara Michael, and Rob Sims. And then helping us with technical support and other help, we have Colleen Bosold and Chris Rice. So welcome to our master plan open house today. Thank you. So the open house format is being held virtually to comply with recommendations to limit the spread of COVID-19. Thanks to all of you for your dedication to our community's health by attending this open house virtually. The open house is being recorded and will be published for later viewing. Because of that, by participating, you consent to your voice, likeness, and any materials you provide being recorded for use and future dissemination. The goal of the open house is for the public to ask questions and provide feedback regarding the draft master plan alternatives. There will be no formal presentation. The public is encouraged to have viewed the project videos that we've shared in our open house webpage. And if you haven't had a chance to view those yet, you can either view them like now, like concurrently, I suppose, to this meeting, or you can watch them after this meeting. The website where these videos are located is www.cityofmiddleton.us, and then /airport open house. So hopefully you've all had a chance to view these project videos in advance, because we didn't want to waste our question and comment format here with a presentation. Master plan materials, as I mentioned, include the videos that can be watched, plus the actual draft chapters of the master plan. And that's all available online, but it's also available at the airport terminal for anyone without computer access. If you want to see these materials and don't have access to a computer, please call 608-836-1711 to arrange for these accommodations as necessary. And questions that were received in advance by April 7th, end of day, 4:30 p.m., will be addressed first during this open house, after which the project team will invite participants to ask questions and offer comments. There will be a 2-minute time limit for questions and comments to maximize participation. Extra effort will be made to check in regularly with those participating by phone to ensure equitable participation. So just as a note there, we'll just try to check in like on the half-hour marks to make sure that we remind people how they can participate by phone if they're not using a computer. This is not a formal meeting of the Airport Master Plan Advisory Committee, although members will be in attendance and are welcome to participate as members of the public. So just as a reminder, if you are a member of AMPAC, you are a member of the public and you have a right to speak just as anyone else does as a member of the public, but you will only be given a 2-minute time window in which to speak just like everyone else. Thank you. For online participants, please ensure your name is displayed. Screenshots of the attendee list will be taken in lieu of an attendance sheet. Participants will have audio deactivated upon entry to the meeting, but will be given the opportunity to unmute at a designated time, and that time would be when we call on you. So basically we'll teach you how to raise your hand here in a minute, and that's how you let us know that you would like to speak. When we call on you, you'll be given that chance to unmute yourself. In the interest of transparency, the chat function will be disabled throughout the entirety of this meeting. If you need technical support during the meeting, please call 608-443-0613. Okay, here's where we get to how you can participate. If you're participating via Zoom through like your computer or a Zoom app on your phone, you'll want to use the raise hand feature when you want to speak. For many computers, this is located under reactions at the bottom of the screen. Alternatively, you may need to go to the participants tab or click on your name to find this raise hand feature. When the host calls your name, you will have the opportunity to unmute yourself. If you are using a phone, to raise your hand, you will have to press *9 to raise the hand. Once you are recognized by the moderator, you would press *6 to unmute yourself. So to recap, *9 to raise your hand if you're on a phone, *6 to unmute yourself. When you are called on, please state your full name, your community of residence, and limit your question or comment to 2 minutes. Please note that there may be a second or two lag after you're unmuted, so give us that grace period if necessary. And participants will be muted by the host when their turn is over so that other participants can speak without interruption. And we're going to do our best to give every participant who wants to speak an opportunity to speak once. And then we'll see what happens after that, how long that takes. To be considerate of everyone's time and to provide an opportunity for all who wish to speak, we will strictly adhere to the 2-minute question and comment time limit. If needed, the moderator, me, will give an approximately 30-second warning to the speaker to wrap up their comments, and the speaker will be muted after the 2-minute time limit. For those who can see me, I'm going to hold up a sign at 30 seconds so that you can have a visual cue that you've got 30 seconds left in your 2-minute time limit. For those who can't see me, the first you'll probably hear me is at the 2-minute mark. I'll say, okay, your 2 minutes is up. Please wrap up because you're done. But I don't want to interrupt people with my voice while you're trying to speak, but I will show a 30-second warning on the screen. The project team will only address questions that are pertinent to the airport master plan. In the interest of time and as a courtesy to all speakers, if your question has already been asked and answered, please try not to ask repeat questions. We will pause and remind those calling in via phone every 30 minutes to confirm that everyone is aware of how to raise their hand and unmute themselves in Zoom. We ask that every participant treat all persons, perspectives, and opinions with respect. Thank you. And then other ways to participate, if you don't wish to speak at the open house today, or if you need to leave before you are called on, you may submit your questions or comments after this meeting by emailing the project team at the email address shown above, which is c29masterplan@meadhunt.com. You can also submit your comments on a comment form that's available on the open house webpage, but it's also available at the airport terminal if you need to stop by and grab a comments form. Or you can call this telephone number, 821-8394. Questions and comments provided by Tuesday, April 20th by 4:30 p.m. will be acknowledged in a report prepared for the next Airport Master Plan Advisory Committee, or AMPAC, meeting. The report will also be made available on the Master Plan webpage and shared with City leadership for consideration in the final Master Plan recommendations. The City of Middleton will also provide further opportunities for public input in the future regarding the Airport Master Plan, both at meetings and through distribution of a community survey prior to completion and adoption of the Master Plan. So we're going to move on to questions that were received in advance. So let's go to those questions.
Okay, thank you, Robert. This is Greg Stern with Mead & Hunt. Thank you all again for participating. We received 8 questions prior to the meeting, and we'll run through those, and then we'll open it up for a live question and answer following that. So the first question we received was, why the change from the existing B1 class design aircraft to future B2 design aircraft? And so maybe just a very quick recap of what B1 and B2 mean. The runway design classification is based on 2 criteria. One is the speed of the aircraft, and the other is the size. The speed component is the letter, the B. The size of the aircraft is the number 1. And so the speed categories range from A as the slowest all the way up to E as the fastest. And the size categories range from 1 as the smallest all the way up to 6 as the largest. So when we're talking about B1 and B2, we're talking about aircraft, at Middleton here that are on the smaller end of the ranges. The difference between B1 and B2 are reflected on this diagram. It's very important to note that B2 aircraft currently operate at the airport today, and that the airport is already designed to B2 standards. The reason we can't classify the existing design aircraft as B2 is that there simply are not enough operations of those types of aircraft. In order to be designated as the design aircraft, the FAA requires that there be 500 annual operations, what they call regular use. And there has not been recent numbers that are that high. They have been that high in the past. In 2010, that was the last period where there were actually 700 annual operations of B2 aircraft. But because those numbers have been below that 500 annual threshold recently, we can't call the existing design aircraft B2. However, because the airport is already designed to B2 standards, and because the projections of future activity show the B2 aircraft again eclipsing 500 threshold, that's kind of the reason. So no physical changes really needed to accommodate B2, and we think it's reasonable over the 20-year planning horizon for these operations to get as high as they were, say even as recent as 2010. Question 2, are the large B2 jets and turboprops noisier than the B1 aircraft that currently use the 4,000-foot long east-west runway? And so I think, again, with this question, I think it's important to remind that B2 jets and turboprops are currently making use of the airport and the existing runway length. An example of a B2 jet is the Citation CJ3, which conducted 70 operations in 2019. An example of a B2 turboprop are the King Air type aircraft, and there were as many as 48 operations of those in 2019. So when we're talking about aircraft noise, it varies from aircraft make and model. And so you can't really correlate noise to the size or the speed of the aircraft. However, once a future airport concept is agreed upon, and that concept may be no change, we will develop noise contours that reflect that future condition. Question 3. Do either of the two alternatives, 1 and 2, and this question is in regard to the alternatives for the east-west runway, runway 1028, do either of the two alternatives that you have chosen, 1 and 2, for future study, have a proposed east-west runway length that would be able to support these larger B2 turboprops and jets? So just switching over to this slide really quickly, again, just to reemphasize, the B2 designation corresponds to the aircraft's speed and size. And that designation is not tied to the length of the runway. That designation determines the width of the runway. It determines the size of the safety areas and the object-free areas. It determines separation standards, like how much distance do you need to have between the runway and the taxiway. But it does not determine runway length. That guidance comes from a completely separate advisory circular that the FAA puts together. What drives runway length primarily is the weight of the aircraft. And so when we looked at these alternatives here, you can see that they're corresponding to the weight. So alternatives 1 and 2, we're looking at aircraft weighing less than 12,500 pounds with more than 10 passenger seats. And when you look at aircraft levels of that type of aircraft, in combination with the jets and turboprops that also operate there today, there is justification under current conditions for a small extension to that runway, a 200-foot extension. However, if you are to look at the alternatives for 3 and 4, again, there just are not enough numbers of operations of those heavier aircraft to justify those links at this time. Okay, question 4. What is the expected increase in LMAX noise levels associated with extending the length of the primary east-west runway to accommodate larger jets and turboprops arriving at the airport from the east that fly over our homes on Glacier Ridge Road? So again, I think it's important to remind folks that the LMAX noise level corresponds to one single event. So one flyover event, and that's one aircraft coming in, flying over, and then leaving. So a runway extension, similar to the links that were depicted on alternatives 1 and 2, would not change that LMAX noise level for any particular aircraft. And the reason is that the future projected aircraft activities are the same in the future as they are today. So we're not projecting different class of aircraft. We're not anticipating anything larger than the B2 that operate there today. So when we're talking about single noise events, they would essentially be the same. Now, once a decision is made again on what to do with the future airfield configuration, we will be looking at the future noise contours and providing those in the master plan. Question 5 is similar, again, related to the LMAX noise contours, those single event noise contours. It says the LMAX contour map, figure 415 in chapter 4, shows 75 decibels at our Glacier Ridge home when a Beech 99 turboprop flies over. That is at a nuisance, annoying, noisy urban level, like being next to a busy highway. Is it likely to get even noisier with an increase in the number of the larger aircraft that would be using a longer east-west runway? So again, I think just to emphasize that the LMAX is tied to the single event noise, and the type of aircraft, again, that we're projecting to operate at the airport is the same as those that operate there today. So when we're talking about those single event noise events, the LMAX contours will essentially stay the same. Question 6. I heard that alternatives 3 and 4, and this again is in reference to the east-west runway alternatives. Alternatives 3 and 4, with the relatively large proposed runway extensions, are not moving forward simply because they weren't cost effective. Why should the city spend extra money for alternatives 1 and 2, extending the primary east-west runway by 200 or 400 feet, if these runway links won't support larger jets and turboprops, those weighing over 12,500 pounds? So this question has a couple of parts to it, and so the response has a couple of parts. So alternatives 3 and 4 and again, those are those larger extension links. They were dismissed for several reasons, but they were not tied to the cost of those. Again, there just are not enough current numbers of activity by those aircraft weighing more than 12,500 pounds to immediately justify a runway length of that length at this time. Those alternatives too also have a runway length that pushes the runway protection zone off airport property. And when you're talking about runway lengths that are shown in 3 and 4, what also happens is that you end up having inadequate clearances over Capitol View Road to the west, and that there are a number of trees, poles, and houses to the west where the obstructions begin to get into a level that is more challenging to deal with. So that's why 3 and 4 were dismissed. The second part, why should the city spend the money on alternatives 1 or 2? So a 200-foot extension, again, corresponds to aircraft that weigh less than 12,500 pounds with more than 10 passenger seats. So again, when you look at those type of aircraft in combination with the jets and turboprops, there is immediate justification for that type of runway length. That project would not be a standalone type of extension. You wouldn't close the runway just to extend it by 200 feet. However, it's likely that the pavement will need to be rehabbed and you'll need to shut the runway down over the 20-year planning horizon. And if you were to do a small extension like that, it would be wrapped into with a project like that. Any decision to extend the runway by 200 feet or otherwise is a community decision, and it will have to be based on a number of factors that include the aeronautical considerations, the environment, community involvement, and land use compatibility. And those would all need to be factored in before implementing any kind of runway extension. Question 7. The existing 4,000-foot east-west runway is currently serving 300 to 400 beach airliner 99 flights a year. Do you expect that number to increase with a longer east-west runway 1028? So the operations by Beach 99 are predominantly conducted by 2 companies, Pro Air Cargo Consultants and Freight Runners. And both of those companies conduct, between the 2 companies, almost daily operations of air freight to the airport for UPS and for area companies. So the operations by those types of aircraft are driven more by the demand. And while a small extension would likely increase the accessibility and make it easier for those aircraft to operate there, the level of operations by those types of aircraft is going to be more tied to the demand for air freight rather than any kind of incremental lengthening of the runway. And question 8, this was the last one we had received in advance. The question that comes to mind over and over again in this whole process is this: why are pilots, a minority of the population, in charge of making decisions for the majority of the populace? If the general population really is so keen to approve this airport expansion, then why doesn't the city of Middleton open it up for the city of Middleton, town of Middleton, and town of Springfield to vote on it? And the response to this is that the pilots are not making the decision on the future of the airport here. The airport is owned by the city of Middleton, and it is the Common Council that will have the final decision-making authority in this process. The city intentionally and proactively invited residents from the town of Springfield and the town of Middleton to participate on the Airport Master Plan Advisory Committee, the AMPAC. In addition to holding this open house and opportunities that have been made for public comment at those AMPAC meetings, the city has further committed to providing more opportunities for public involvement, both at subsequent AMPAC meetings or city meetings, and through distribution of a community survey. And that would be done prior to the finalization and the adoption of the master plan. So with that, Robert, I'm gonna turn it back to you and Colleen. And I think our plan now is to open it up to folks to ask live questions here and provide comment.
Great. Thank you very much, Greg. Maybe we can put up quickly the screen again that shows people how to raise a hand. I see we already have 2 people have raised their hand. That's great. They figured it out. For those who might want to speak, if we can find the slide that we looked at earlier, that says,
My apologies here.
that's okay. I know sometimes it's hard to go backwards in a slideshow presentation.
There we go.
There we go. Thank you very much. Yes, great. So as a reminder, if you're using Zoom, either on a computer or through an app on a phone, a smartphone, you would use the raise hand feature. And again, that changes on what kind of computer or phone you're using or what version of Zoom you're using. But the raise hand feature is often found under the reactions tab at the bottom of the screen. Alternatively, you may need to go to the participants tab, or you may just need to click on your own name and find something there that sometimes it's like 3 dots or something that allows you to have more features. And hopefully one of those things will allow you to find the raise hand feature. It does change per device, so I can't tell you exactly. If you're using a phone.
Robert, if I may, this is Mark Opitz. I also, sorry to interrupt, I placed this same slide on the web page a few minutes ago so that people could access it there during the meeting.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Mark.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, I appreciate that. It's good to know. And there are a couple of screenshots here to the right that show kind of where you might find the raise hand feature if you're using Zoom. If you're calling in on just a phone, you press *9 to raise your hand. And that's all you would need to do at the time you want to raise your hand. But just looking ahead, when we call on you to unmute yourself, you would have to hit *6 to unmute yourself on a phone. So hopefully that gives people a start here. And just as a reminder, when we call on you, please state your full name, community of residence, and limit your question or comments to 2 minutes. So let's go on to the first raised hand.
Okay, thank you. We've got Joan Ziegler. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself, and then you can ask your question or state your comment. You should get a little button that pops up that asks you to unmute.
And to that end, the button that pops up.
I got it.
Okay, you found it? Great. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Joan Ziegler. I live at 4797 Capitol View Road, and I'm sharing this Zoom access with Stephen, who would also like to ask a question. So I don't know if we raise our hand again or if he could do following. But my question is, in the master plan put forth as it is, I first like to ask a question and make a comment. What is the extension of pavement both for runways and for additional hangars? And the elephant in the room that I have a question about is, how is it possible that we should be looking at increasing pavement when we have had such severe flooding in this area and don't have the water storage capacity necessary to handle the stormwater at this moment in time? So if you could answer those questions, I'd be grateful.
I would also, you have another minute and a half. Can you also ask your question and your comment during?
Okay, so my comment is, we live here and we were greatly affected by the flooding. And I'm wondering how the environmental impact assessment has addressed the need for stormwater storage in addition to taking up more infiltration space through hard pavement for either hangars or runway extension, and how much in this current plan is proposed for additional hard surface.
Square feet.
Square feet, oh yeah.
Oh,
And how that stormwater is going to be handled.
okay, thank you for your comment and for your question. Why don't we, I'll see if is anyone from Mead and Hunt, Greg, able to answer the question about the how how can we, extend or add more hard surfaces that don't allow infiltration? Is there anyone who can speak to that?
Yeah, I can touch on this, Robert, and maybe others at Mead and Hunt can supplement. But in terms of the alternatives that are being looked at for the runways and hangars, they do both include some change, and then we also are looking at the no change alternatives. For those that do have additional pavement associated with them, what would need to be done if those were to be carried forward is that we would have to meet the stormwater ordinance and requirements that the city has in place. That would be done in the environmental process. That would be done in even greater detail in the design process. Where we would sort of address it in the planning level here is just to acknowledge the fact that it would need to be done, and that you're right. If we were to select a build or an alternative that adds impervious area, we would likely need to reserve space to accommodate the associated stormwater that would go along with that. So I can't give you an exact square footage at this time, but I can acknowledge that stormwater would have to be incorporated as part of any change, whether it be added pavement or grading changes.
In order to do the pavement that was put in for the current expansion, the ground had to be dewatered. I don't know where you're going to be storing this extra water.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that comment as well. And you said that Steve might want to speak as well. Why don't we actually take, since you're unmuted, why don't we go right into Steve if that's okay?
Great.
Thank you, Robert. Steve Ziegler, Town of Middleton, Capitol View Road. It's more of a statement, I guess, than a question. Kind of the facts is that really nobody that I've talked to has come out to actually say they do not support the existing airport or airport facilities or operations. Almost everyone I've communicated with has indicated that they're vehemently opposed to expansion of the airport, of pavement and airport operations. The next point is that the expansion of the airport and operations will have virtually no positive impact on the citizens of the city of Middleton, Town of Middleton, and Town of Springfield, but will have, in fact, significant negative impacts on those citizens. Therefore, why are we going down this route? Historically, let's go back to the 90s, and that the airport, the purchase of the airport, the building of the airport, and now the airport master plan have probably been the most exasperating political issue for the city of Middleton that they've addressed in the last 30 years, and we are addressing it again. If expansion tends to move forward from this point, that issue will not go away, but will expand further. The airport was purchased by the city explicitly for the purpose of, and everybody supports this, flight training schools, recreational aviation, a charter service, local business use, medical support for UW Med flights, hangar rentals, community engagement, and at that time was to, and very vehemently supported by the Friends of Pheasant Branch Creek, was to support the environment and the wetlands and floodplains, which are now being in question with expansion.
Okay, Steve, your 2 minutes is up. You want to wrap it up?
That is it, except for the fact that the city council, when the airport was built, said explicitly no more runway expansion. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Steve. Okay.
Robert, this is Laura Moreland at Mead and Hunt. I just wanted to clarify with Joan's comment the master plan is not an environmental assessment, so I just wanted to make sure people understood that on the call.
Sure.
We did a
and thank-
non-environmental overview, so thank you.
Yeah, I would say that's more of a clarification to what Greg said, which is at this early stage, and thank you for that clarification, at this early stage of the master plan, it's not really part of that, but you're right, as if any project is to move forward at all, there's got to be a whole lot more work, including that type of environmental study. So thank you. Why don't we go to the next raised hand?
Okay, next up, we have somebody just identified as guest. So I'm going to ask you to unmute. When you get that pop-up button, go ahead and click unmute, and then please let us know your name and your community.
Hi, this is Cynthia Richardson, Town of Middleton. I would like it noted for, can you hear me first of all?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Oh, great, thank you. I would like it noted for the record that the normal city public input time limit is 3 minutes, and limiting today's 2 minutes for public input is not in the public interest. I also would like some follow-up for the next AMPAC meeting, and today if possible, where Mr. Stern came up with the 696 or 700 B2 operations in 2010. The last number that I recall at an AMPAC meeting was 470, and that was close to 500 as it was referenced then. So I'd appreciate that. I'd also like to point out that the federal code states that U.S. aviation priorities and policy directives state airports you need to minimize airport noise impact on nearby communities. And a U.S. Department of Transportation report to Congress says that airports should be compatible with surrounding communities, maintaining a balance between the needs of aviation, the environment, and the requirements of residents. And unfortunately, the city just updated its citywide comprehensive plan and approved it for the transportation element for Maury Airport and removed the balance language. That's very disappointing for people who live here. The city should honor its commitments in Resolution 1998-20 for this recreational hobby airport of convenience, not necessity. Dane County Regional Airport is only 9.9 miles away. It's a full-service airport of necessity. The no-build Maury Airport alternative was only added to this master plan project later, after residents said, why is there no build option in this alternatives analysis? So finally it was added. Maury Aircraft Operations produce 217.25 pounds of mobile air lead emissions each year. Airborne lead emissions from Maury Airport aircraft are a serious problem for this densely populated residential area. That also includes schools, playgrounds, and parks surrounding Maury Airport. Lead is a neurotoxicant. There is no safe level of lead in humans, particularly children, and lead does not dissipate in the environment over time. The daily repetitive.
Your 2 minutes is up, so can you wrap up your comments?
Yes, thank you, Robert. I just would ask that Mead and Hunt please not mislead the public about how noise will supposedly not increase with expansion, because it absolutely will, and it's already disruptive to people who live here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for your comments. And that will be recorded, and we can talk about those at the next AMPAC meeting as well. So let's move on to the next raised hand, whoever that might be.
All right, next up we have Gary. Gary, I'm going to give you the opportunity to unmute.
Okay. Am I on?
You are on.
Great. Gary Keys, Whispering Winds neighborhood. First of all, I'd like to make a little bit of statement. I think with the items that were sent in, those were all questions. That's great. I think there were also a lot of comments sent in. I thought those are going to get read as well, but irregardless of that, I think when those questions were raised or brought up there, you didn't attach a name to those. So I'm a little surprised that at this point we have to give our name, but those did not require one. And I think those should have been read as a named question sent in by somebody. So I'll start with my statement here. It's the discussion here, I think, regards a 20-year airport plan, but I'd like to look back on the perceived plan 20 years ago. The perception by homeowners, new and current at that time, was that a small municipal airport would remain that way within reasonable growth guidelines. Within the past few years, the air traffic has increased dramatically. Last Saturday was a prime example of that. I think in a 7-hour period, the drone of aircraft was nearly continuous. And standing in the air, you could see 3 aircraft up making continuous loops. We all bought into a lifestyle of reasonable rural urban quiet, and a relatively small group of individuals and companies, I think, are impacting a quality of life for thousands of residents. Recreational and commercial operations impact the area differently. Most likely recreational flights will be less frequent, and in poor weather, flying time will decrease, but commercial operations, especially freight, need to fly regularly, and weather is less an impact to that because of their need for consistency. Any expansion means a consistent increase in larger, louder aircraft. An increase in hangars increases the number of aircraft, and therefore traffic noise will increase. As was stated, larger planes fly at less than capacity weight due to runway length. So after hangar numbers increase, does pressure then increase to create longer runways by the people that now we have a lot more hangars? We're going to have more planes, potentially larger planes. They want that longer runway length. So
Okay.
that's a question, but the aircraft need to use, yes, and you need to use a pattern away from residential and respect altitude and noise levels that are impacting our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Appreciate your comments. And to get to your very first point, yeah, I should probably state, we are going to read some of the comments kind of at the end, but there were some long comments that might take me a little bit of time to read into the record. So we wanted to do comments kind of at the end of this session, make sure we give everybody a chance who called in to have their chance to make comments or ask questions. But that's a good point, and I should bring that up, that once we've kind of gotten through all of the raised hands, we can start going to some of the comments that were sent to us in advance as well. So thank you for that. Why don't we move on to the next raised hand? Thanks.
Okay, our next one up is Betsy True. Betsy, you should have the opportunity to unmute yourself.
Why don't you go first, Danny? Hi, this is Danny Arts, and Betsy True will add her comment after I add mine, if that's okay.
Great.
We live on Tepfer Road in the town of Middleton. My first comment is that I don't see from all the information that has been shown that there's any need to expand the east-west runway. And I also feel that the north-south runway should either be removed or realigned to eliminate the impact on the land areas that's south of Airport Road. I also felt that this process has been going on like over a year, and I thought the options should have been ranked, and that by now you should have had like a first choice and a second choice, so people could actually say, well, you know, if your first choice is no expansion, then people would comment, yes, we like that, rather than just giving some of these, but not having any kind of feel for what the committee is actually supporting. And then also there's no financial impacts that I saw given for any of the options, just kind of some general terms. And it seems that would be very important for people to consider, in that it seems like if expansion occurs, it's going to be for the benefit of a few businesses and at the cost of the general public. And I think we need to know what those numbers might be to actually give a valid opinion. I'll let Betsy add her comments.
So yes, Betsy True, Tepfer Road. We live a fair distance from the airport, and yet over the past, I would say 5 years, we moved here, 20 years ago, and it was totally acceptable when we moved in that we were near a small rural airport. But at this point, I am very annoyed by the constant low-flying planes that just, we have, when we are outside, and I'm outside a lot, you can't hear people talking. We have to pause our conversation for that. This is not what I signed up for that, 20 years ago. And I thought, there was a promise not to extend the runway, and apparently the committee has said, oh, you can't expect us to abide by that promise. Well, what is a promise? What is the agreement? I'm also very concerned about lead pollution. These are damages to children that cannot be undone. And I think that is, and the water, also to the water, that is stuff that cannot really be undone. And I think this would be regrettable if the airport expanded and caused all this distress to the surrounding community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Why don't we move on to the next raised hand?
Okay, next up we have Jenny P. And Jenny, you should be getting an option to unmute.
Hello.
Hello.
Jenny Pavlovic, Town of Middleton, Hickory Woods. I have a question and then I have some comments that go with that. I'm wondering what FAA guidance you're required to follow for airport master plans for non-towered airports that have like no separate air traffic control function and no monitoring of flights in populated areas. I'm especially concerned about potential third-party risk to those on the ground. Potentially unsafe situations that would be noted at a towered airport are sometimes not reported here or not known about here. And I'm just wondering how the fact that this is a non-towered airport, how is that accounted for in the master plan or in a potential master plan that could allow for more interactions between larger, faster aircraft and smaller, slower circling aircraft like the training flights that we see here all the time that are piloted by students? And at what point would a tower be needed? One example is last summer, a woman who lives west of the airport witnessed from her yard what she called a near miss between a helicopter and a Cirrus SR-22 training flight. One of the aircraft, which I think was the helicopter, but I didn't see it, took evasive action. And the airport manager didn't report this incident because he said that the pilot took evasive action as he should. But likewise, being in the neighborhood, this situation was terrifying to the woman on the ground because she thought they were going to crash like right over her yard. Those kind of things don't even get reported here. On November 1st, which was a very windy Sunday, I witnessed an Embraer Phenom 300 jet taking off west towards that same neighborhood, and it struggled to take off in very high crosswinds. And I was actually holding my breath because I wasn't sure it was going to make it. It was heading right towards the neighborhood. And that runway length, the runway length and combined with that crosswind, according to data that had been presented by Mead and Hunt, wasn't sufficient for that aircraft in those conditions. And that kind of stuff doesn't get noted or reported because this isn't a towered airport. And on Sunday, the airport manager probably isn't even there unless he's doing training flights. So I'm wondering what FAA guidance you're required to follow for airport master plans for non-towered airports and how it would be different than a towered airport when there's no separate air traffic control function and flights aren't being monitored in a populated area. And how is this being taken into account? And what liability would Mead and Hunt and the city of Middleton have if it's not taken into account that this is a non-towered airport?
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Your 2 minutes is up. I will turn this over to Mead and Hunt, although I will say, at least the original question that I heard may be a little bit outside the scope of the master plan process because it deals with more kind of like day-to-day current airport operations with what we do with a non-towered airport. But if anyone from Mead and Hunt wants to try to answer the questions that they heard, that'd be great.
Sure, Robert, I'd like Rick Dunkelberg, if he could, or Barbara Michael to jump in on this. And I think Jenny's question was, what guidance changes are there between a towered airport and a non-towered airport? And I know there were some other sort of supplemental questions that went along with that, but Rick, could you address that maybe?
Yeah, sure, thanks. This is Rick, and the FAA really has no significant difference in guidance when you're preparing a master plan for either a towered or non-towered airport. The same advisory circular that guides generally master plan development is applicable to both of them. And there's really no difference in what you evaluate when you're looking at a towered or non-towered airport master plan.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So you didn't take anything into account?
It sounds like there is nothing different between the two modalities, I guess. So why don't we move on now to the next raised hand? Looks like Eric.
Yep, Eric is our next one. Eric E. should have an opportunity to unmute yourself.
There you go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. The problem that I see with this whole thing is that nothing in the documents from Mead and Hunt is that nothing's being done to address the current noise pollution problems that we already have today. And that needs to be part of an airport master plan. On some days we hear training flights operating constantly. Every few minutes there's another loud plane buzzing up full power into the wind up over the horizon. By the way, I live in Prairie Home Estates, west of the airport, town of Middleton. It's horrible. And why we have to endure this is for recreation. It's so that some pilots can get a thrill out of flying toys around, playing follow the leader or whatever. Mooring Capital Flight have made their businesses out of teaching people to fly these toys around. These are not essential businesses by any means. It's a hobby, and it's a hobby with external costs that the pilots and the training companies in the city do not pay for. We pay for it with our mental health, our property values, potentially with our kids' health as well. I'm not against these hobbies. I can handle some planes flying over once in a while. I'm against uncontrolled noise pollution that I pay for. What can be done? That's the question. There's things that can be done. I don't know if the mayor, who all's on this call, the mayor, Mike Davis, who's here, but this is a mess that's created by the city when you became the benefactor for the Maury Airport and the pilots, and then by inviting still another flight school to the city to take off into the town of Middleton, and it needs to be addressed. It's not going away. So the question is, how are you going to do that? And there's things that can be done that need to be part of this discussion. One is the Jade Holfeld from Capital Flight, to her credit, brought up in an AMPAC meeting, instituting a right turn pattern like they have at other airports. In this case, it would take the training flights out over empty farm fields largely. That's something that could have a big impact, a positive impact on the situation. Another thing is you should be talking about giving us 1 day a week where if it's a nice day, we can have an enjoyable day outside without planes buzzing overhead constantly. I know that there's FAA welfare money that's come into the city that has strings attached to it, but I can't believe that the city doesn't have an ability with owning the airport, leasing out space to everyone to control some of this traffic. 1 day a week would be nice, that we can not have training flights flying overhead. Or go back to the resolution of 1998 when this was put in and look at the levels of flights that were talked about there when this went to a vote.
Eric, thanks. Your 2 minutes are up.
My question is, Robert, if I could just put one quick question.
Sure.
What can the city do to limit noise pollution that we have today and make that part of the master plan?
Okay. Thank you for your question. And actually, maybe that sounds like a question more for the city. I will say that the master plan process envisions no change and provides alternatives for if the city wants to look at various options. A no change scenario doesn't seem to do what you're asking for. Seems to be, how can we reduce what we have now? How can we change in a negative direction, shrinking, making smaller, or reducing days that the airport can operate? And those are just not the FAA, we can't tell people when they can land planes or take off. So
I'm not saying close the airport. I'm saying training flights that account for the majority of the noise pollution and abating that in a real way.
I personally think that is fully outside the scope of the master plan process, and potentially outside the scope of anything that the city can even do with an airport. Unless somebody from Mead and Hunt has a different answer, I think that's kind of the city's, that'd probably be the city's position, is that we can't fly in the face of, you know, the federal government and the FAA.
I think, Robert, the only thing I might be able to supplement is, you know, one of the alternatives that was included was a right-hand traffic pattern that, you know, that is being considered to sort of take traffic in a different direction. But in terms of the ability to sort of shut the airport down one day a week, I think you're right. I don't think there's any, given the federal grant assurances associated with the airport.
I'm not saying,
yeah.
Let me just jump in, please. I'm not saying shut the airport down. I'm not saying shut the airport down. I'm saying restrict training flights.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you for your comments, Eric. Why don't we move on to the next raised hand?
Okay, next up we have Paul Hudson. Paul, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you. Sound check?
Yep, we can hear you.
Thank you. Paul Hudson, I'm in the town of Middleton. I'd also like to say that I'm a pilot, a proud pilot, and I'm proud to have learned to fly with the Maury Airplane Company many years ago, before the airport was transitioned. And I would like to comment on some of the issues about the master plan. I am sensitive to the noise issues, and as best as I can, as I'm practicing not going over individual houses, it's becoming increasingly difficult with the development to the west of the airport. One of the things I'm concerned about is the undeveloped farmland to the west and northwest. And I'd like to make sure that it's considered how these farmers that at some point might like to sell their land might be able to sell it, and at the same time not bring in developments, high density residential areas that would be further impacted in the future by airplane traffic. So I think we need to look to the future in terms of trying to protect the farmers' investment in their properties, as well as the residential owners of, at present. I'm fine with a right-hand pattern. I think it would take some adjustment for people that are familiar with the airport, that they need to be reminded that we need to change the direction. I frankly think that if people can't fly because of the crosswind and they would need to use runway 19, and it's on a day when it's not plowed or it's too soggy, that they frankly shouldn't fly. I think that we look at the weather reports, the weather forecasts, and I don't think that it's that big an issue. I don't see a need to increase the length of the runway for the kind of flying that I do. I've had 2 airplanes at hangars at Maury, and I look forward to having another one there in the future. I would encourage building more hangars. I would favor build options 1 or 2, and understanding that the north-facing hangar doors could be a problem. And I also would like to see non-leaded fuel available at the airport. If you don't have it there, people will not be inclined to try to get the STC available for their airplane to use that unleaded fuel in their airplane. Pilots are also concerned about the lead in our fuel. We just can't fly many airplanes without it. And if we don't have the lead, if we don't have the fuel available for us, we can't switch to it. And I'll stop there because my 2 minutes is up.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much for your comments, Paul. Let's move on to the next raised hand.
Okay, next up we have Andy. Andy, you should be able to unmute. Not hearing you quite yet. Andy, I'm not sure if you're on via a phone. If so, *9. Also, if you're on a cell phone or something, you might want to make sure you're not double muted with your device as well as Zoom. You should have to hit a little button that says unmute. You might see something that says the host would like you to unmute. Try that one more time. Oh,
for a very brief second.
Let's try once more.
And Robert, After this, Robert, it might be helpful to do your periodic reminder because it's been over half an hour.
Yeah, it's about, well, yeah, it's almost 10:30, so thank you.
Yep.
We'll, if Andy, can we get you on?
See, trying one more time here. We saw you unmute for the briefest of seconds. Okay, we're not getting you, Andy. Why don't we come back and try it again after the break? I did. I saw that Gary with 2 R's had his hand raised and he jumped down. So I'm not sure if he lowered his hand and put it back up. But I'm going to go to Gary.
Well, before we go to Gary, actually, why don't we do our half-hour meeting reminders now that it is 10:30? Again, if you're using Zoom, either on a computer or on an app on a phone, you'll need to use your raise hand feature to ask to speak. For many computers, this is under reactions at the bottom of the screen, but it may be under a participants tab, or it may be something where you click your own name to ask to raise your hand. If you're calling in via a phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. And then once we call on you, please press *6 to unmute yourself. And for everyone, please state your full name and community of residence and limit your questions or comments to 2 minutes. Thanks. And if you're truly having, actually, let's go back to the screen because I don't have the telephone number in front of me. If you are having just absolute technical support problems during this meeting or this open house, please call 608-443-0613 to see if we can help you resolve that issue, whatever it might be. Thank you. Why don't we, try to go on to Gary now.
Okay, Gary, looks like you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Gary Bunz. I am a pilot, and I strongly support the city of Middleton, the airport, and the use for what it's for. I hear a lot of things that are obviously, I would say, anti or against a lot of what's going on out there, or maybe half true about what's going on out there. A couple quick things. It's not just a recreational airport. I do believe in the last 15 years, I've taken maybe 2 or 3 recreational flights per year. And I do fly over 100 hours a year. I do use it for business a fair amount. I do have a sizable hangar out there, and because we're restricted in hangar space, I do rent it out or some space out to other pilots. One gentleman does a lot of flights. I think he's up over 400 rescues for dogs. It's like a life flight, but for animals, and he does a fantastic job. Another guy uses his for business, and he flies a Cirrus. He's in our environment and out of our environment, probably in about 5 minutes or less. Unless he's doing training flights for his own safety, like we all do, which makes us better pilots and safer pilots. And sometimes I'll do a training flight in Middleton. Other times I'll go to other airports out in the country. The aircraft I fly currently doesn't burn any lead, so I won't address the lead issue. I did talk to a physician about it, and he's told me not to waste the time. All the points that were stated are valid, but the quantities, according to him, are minuscule. I do want to get to what Jen said, and it was about safety, and I am all about safety, and I think that this whole issue should change from the discussion on where we are currently going on a lot of the things that are maybe not totally accurate to really safety. When pilots train, they become safer. They need to train at and around an airport environment for some of the skills that they need to fly. And I really do believe that extending a runway or improving the north-south runway does make that a much, much safer environment. And that's really what this is all about. If you add 500 or 1,000 feet to a runway, or if you increase the length or improve the surface of the north-south runway, you are going to make a safer airport environment at Maury Airport. There's absolutely no question about it. It does not add more lead. It doesn't burn any more fuel. The planes that fly there still make the same amount of noise. It doesn't make it any louder. It really just improves the environment. Now, a fair amount of my flying, probably most.
Hey, Gary, Sorry, you've reached your
Yeah.
2-minute limit.
I
do
get it.
appreciate
I guess I just want to circle back to what everybody's kind of touched on. And sometimes in a negative light, but it's really positive. It's about safety. Let's make sure that we explain the benefits of an improved runway surface. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Gary.
And Robert, I didn't hear Mr. Bunn state his community that he's from. And he said he was a pilot, but we're recording communities too.
Sorry, I already muted him. Let me find him
Oh,
here.
okay.
Yep, sorry about not speaking that up front. I am in Middleton, city of Middleton.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
You bet.
And thank you, Mark. Why don't we call on the next person?
Okay, I'm gonna try Andy again, see if we have any better luck this time.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, great. Hi, Andy.
All right, sorry about that minor technical difficulties. My name is Andy Ziegler. I currently live in the city of Madison. I was born and raised on Capitol View Road, right down the street from the airport. And I have a few comments that I'd like to make today. The most importantly is, well, I guess not most importantly, there are a few factors that I think are at the height of my interest here, and they are environmental and community. As we have heard previously, the environmental degradation from continued expansion of impermeable surfaces in our area is the utmost concern of mine. We have had consistent water problems in the Pheasant Branch area. It has caused major community issues throughout that watershed. I believe it was 2 years ago that we had the big floods that tore apart most of Pheasant Branch. I, like my parents stated before, have an understanding of the water table and where the water actually lives in our community. And there is no more places to mitigate this water to. And so in an environmental aspect, where this water goes and what that means to my community is very, very important. And I do not think that it can hang on anymore. Runoff, which inevitably means more chemicals, more issues in our watershed, which is already at risk. My parents well tested positive for, there's something that we can no longer drink the water out of the tap. And for the community around us, that will continue to be of issue. That is fed also by the farms, the mega farms that are in the area. The other side of this is the community that is in the immediate area. It is ever growing. There is a number of schools that are close to the airport. I do not think that they need the airport or private jets or expansion at this time. I think that it is important.
Your 2 minutes is up. Can you wrap up your comments?
Sure. Yep, I can wrap up my comments. So I'd like to state for the record that I am against expansion of the airport in any terms, and that environmental impact is at the utmost importance. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate your comments. Let's move on to, I think Shelley might be the next person.
Yep, Shelley Schmoller. There you go.
Hi, my name is Shelley Schmoller. I live in the town of Middleton on Highwood Circle, so just east of the airport property, and our back line borders the airport property. Thanks for taking the time this Saturday to answer our questions and listen to us. One of my questions is there's a plan that's being proposed that has a road that connects Springton Drive down to the road that is by the Lexus dealer, with a road going through that area. My questions are, one, is that going to be a public thoroughfare, a public road that people can go on? How large would that road be? And how much traffic would you expect to see on that road? We talked a lot about noise pollution, and I'm just worried that adding an additional road would also make for additional traffic noise, especially behind my house, which would be quite close to the border to our property. My thought is that if there is a road there, which I think there would need to be if we put hangars in that area, that the road not connect from Airport Road to Snyder Road, therefore making it less inviting for traffic to move back and forth. And then the pilots could use it to access their hangars and get their planes out and that sort of thing. But it would not be a public thoroughfare and therefore wouldn't increase noise as much. So my questions are mainly just about the plan that involves putting a road from Springton Drive to the road near the Lexus dealer.
Oh, okay. Thanks for your comments and a question there. I don't know if anybody from Greg, if anybody from Mead and Hunt wants to try to discuss. I think one of our hangar options did look at how access might be given to people trying to reach a hangar, if that was a path that moved forward.
Yes, and I tried to just bring up real quickly the hangar development alternatives that we were looked at. So thank you, Shelley. I think the one that you're referencing is the build alternative 2 here that shows, like you say, a road connecting from, I believe this is Venture Drive that runs along the Lexus dealership here around the Highwood Circle neighborhood and would connect to Springton Drive up here. Your comment is a good one, and your question is a good one. In terms of would we have to connect it all the way up here? I mean, in terms of just the access to the hangars, no. I mean, I think we could, as you maybe suggested, end the road here in terms of providing, you know, the land side access for folks to access a conceptual hangar like this. I think having that additional connectivity maybe created some other potential circulation improvements, but understand that that comes along with other activity and other noise and things as well. So I don't have any exact numbers to give you in terms of like how much traffic would be going through there, but maybe we could take it as a to-do list to try to address that comment as part of the ultimate response in the report that'll be coming out with this open house.
Robert, I can add from a city perspective, I can help provide some information.
That would be fantastic. Go ahead,
This is Mark Opitz, city planner. We oftentimes, if this were to move forward, this type of idea with extending a road and connecting it, we have with any development, we have the ability to use a traffic consultant to model traffic patterns. We have SRF Consulting, which models, does traffic impact assessments for developments. So that could be, I mean, I can't commit that, but that is an option that the city has when there's a project that we think is significant, that the city engineer thinks is significant. And the only other thing I would add is we also, from a public safety standpoint, our fire, EMS, police would probably not like to see a cul-de-sac that's significant length. I know that in the towns, there's oftentimes townships have policies that regulate the length to, I think it's 1,000 feet. It may vary by town, but I know that the longer the cul-de-sac, the harder it is for emergency access. That's the basic principle. But as Greg said, this is something that can, and I agree, should be studied. It's a very valid question.
Okay, great. And I'll just state that, you know, it is just one of multiple alternatives that have been looked at. We may not even be recommending something like that, but it's as we get to, basically as the city decides what options might move forward, you know, that's when some of this work might be done too, rather than maybe when it's all just early proposal. It might come later after somebody says, well, we'd really like to look at something more in detail. That might be when we would do a deep dive into a traffic study, for instance. Okay, why don't we call in the next person?
Okay, next up is Pamela Krill. Pamela, you should have the option to unmute now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
We can.
All right, so I have 3 questions. The first is, what is the process for answering questions that are asked during this meeting as well as other AMPAC meetings that have come before? I realize this is just an open house, The reason I ask that is that many times questions are asked and they're not answered during the meeting, which is totally makes sense because you may not have the answer at your fingertips. And I'm wondering, is anyone tracking these questions so that they can then be answered at the next meeting? Doesn't appear to be the case. If you look at the minutes from the meetings, those questions, specific questions that are asked during comment periods are not outlined typically in the minutes. So that's my first question. How are these questions being recorded and answered? That's number one. Number two is, there was a comment earlier that from a pilot's perspective that some of these proposed changes are being proposed because of safety concerns. And my question is the airport not safe currently? It was my understanding that current operations, what's happening there now is safe. And if it's not, that would concern me. So that was my second question. My third question is, and this is probably the most important, AMPAC has been meeting now for over a year, and there's been a lot of data presented to that committee. And it was either the last AMPAC meeting or the one prior to that when all the alternatives were presented to the committee by Mead and Hunt. And it just seemed to me that the committee, or at least thus far, does not have a good method to synthesize all the data that it's received so that a recommendation or recommendations can be made or presented to the Airport Commission and then up to the Common Council. And that's that's a question I'm asking, whether that's been discussed internally, how you're going to go about doing that when you've got this 12 or 13 person committee. How are you going to synthesize all this data to present the various options in a methodical fashion? Because it just seems like, as I say, a meeting or two ago, people were just sort of off the cuff, people being AMPAC members off the cuff, just sort of saying, yeah, that sounds good, or no, I don't like that, or whatever. And to me, that's very
Pamela, your 2 minutes are up.
I'm sorry.
That's
I'll just close with, to me, that's a really important part of the committee's function, is to come to a reasoned conclusion or conclusions regarding what to recommend. And I would hope that you all are thinking about how you're going to go about doing that and collecting all your collective thoughts and concerns. Thank you.
And Pamela, can you tell us your what community you're with?
Yep, I live in the town of Springfield in Bridle Ridge, a few miles, probably 4 miles west of the airport.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. The 3 questions there. Can Mead and Hunt, Greg, can you?
Yeah. No,
I
think those are really good questions, and I'll take a shot here, and I'll let other members of the team jump in. But I think the first question was kind of a 2-part. What is the process for answering questions that have been received, either at this open house or at other AMPAC meetings, and how are we tracking those? For this open house in particular, all the questions that were received in advance, we've tried to catalog those, or we have cataloged those, and put also responses. And we will also, through the feedback that we've got today, again, catalog all those and put those in a report that will be made available to the Airport Master Plan Advisory Committee to consider all the comments and questions and the responses that have been put together for the team. Second question, was is the airport not safe? I think when we looked at the requirements in the master plan, we do look for anything that may be an opportunity to improve safety, or that may be not consistent with current FAA standards. One of the things that has been mentioned is the runway 1 RPZ off to the south. One of the alternatives, or many of the alternatives, we're trying to look at ways to improve that, to have either greater control of that area or to shift that RPZ more onto airport property. Another thing that comes to mind is the intersection of the 2 runways. Is there an opportunity to decouple those? Now, well, I don't think you could say that either of those are uncommon conditions or necessarily unsafe. We are trying to look at ways to improve safety always and enhance it. And I think those were two areas in particular that we thought could be of benefit, to the airport and addressing and improving safety. The third question was, we presented a lot of information to AMPAC. How are they going to synthesize that data? And I think our thought on that is, we have evaluation criteria that we are going to be applying to each of these alternatives. So the way we've sort of gone about developing these alternatives is we've listed a wide range. I think what we would call the bookends, all the way from doing nothing, and in some instances, even lessening or removing some facilities, all the way up to some expansion and growth alternatives. What we have tried to do is list all the pros and cons associated with those initially, and we've documented those in the chapter. I think through that process, what we've tried to do is then narrow and refine those alternatives and sort of weed out the ones that are non-starters. And then following this opportunity with the public feedback, we would then put together evaluation criteria. And for the alternatives that we are carrying forward, we have committed to putting costs to those. And I think the ultimate decision for the AMPAC folks will be a scorecard. And so that each of the various components, those being operational categories, environmental, financial, the AMPAC folks will have an opportunity to consider all those factors in combination with the pros and cons and score each of these alternatives. And I think through that scoring process, that's ultimately how we see the AMPAC arriving at their recommendation that would be carried forward to the Airport Commission and the City Council. So hopefully that's addressing all three of those questions there. And Robert, I'm not sure if anyone else on the team may have something to, or you or Mark may have something to add to that, but that's my.
I do have something to add, Greg. That was a good answer. I would add that all the AMPAC meetings have been recorded, and that the project team, specifically Mead and Hunt, I know is doing this, and I do too when I prepare the minutes. The project team goes back and reviews the recording to capture all the discussion and questions that came up. So if there are questions that haven't been addressed through this process at the end, I can't imagine that there won't be any that we haven't addressed. Sometimes we don't get to the questions right away because the questions are asked before that chapter has been, before work has finished, has gone on, before work on that chapter has been completed. But we ultimately, the goal is to get to all the questions that have been raised by AMPAC members, and we've been accommodating public input at each of those meetings as well.
Okay, great. Let's see. Yeah, why don't we go on to the next caller?
Okay, that would be Blake Day.
Yes. Hi, I'm a pilot out at Middleton.
And can you identify your community of?
Yeah, the west side of Madison, right on the edge of Middleton.
Got it. Thank you. Go ahead.
I want to address some of the safety things that were brought up. I do think that safety will be increased with extra runway length. It's not saying the airport's not safe now, but it's like cars. There's always room for improvement, no matter how new it is. If that north-south runway does get expanded, it will give more safety margin for same issue if people decide that they want to land on that runway instead. Shutting down training for a day a week is obviously not a feasible option. The right-hand traffic pattern, I do want to address that from 2-8. So if you have a left-hand pattern from 1-0 and a right-hand pattern from 2-8, if somebody is judging the wind differently, both patterns will cross themselves at the same altitude. And I think that that is not a feasible option because of safety. And the standard traffic pattern is a left-hand traffic pattern at almost all airports in the country. I can't speak on noise. I know I follow noise abatement procedures which avoid overflight of the air surrounding houses as much as feasible for safety. And to address the whole tower to airport operation, Madison Tower is closed for 7 hours a day. They have 3 intersecting runways. They don't have crashes there about that. Being a non-towered airport does not change any of the safety factors. You still have to see and avoid with a towered airport. I don't believe I have any more questions or comments.
Okay. Well, thank you for your comments. And unless you had a question, I think those were mostly comments. So why don't we move on to the next caller?
All right, that would be Jeffrey Russell. Jeffrey, you should have the opportunity to unmute.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yep.
You can.
Great. Well, hey, my name is Jeff Russell, and I am a pilot and a hangar owner at the Maury Airport. I'm also a resident of the town of Westport. I just wanted to speak real quickly. Firstly, I want to applaud that the city of Middleton has done an absolutely fantastic job with the Middleton Airport. Since they took ownership of it a number of years ago, it's been a fantastic community asset that it supports business aviation. It supports freight operations, air freight operations, and it supports a healthy amount of recreational aviation as well. And it's a great asset to the community. I'd like to see it continue to be a great asset. One of the fastest growing segments of aviation is tail draggers, so conventional gear aircraft. And one of the things that tail dragger aircraft like are grass runways. And with whatever direction the AMPAC group decides to recommend, I think it's really important to preserve the great mix of use that exists at the airport today, and that includes recreational aviation. And I think it's really important to preserve the grass runway. With that said, I see an opportunity to pave the north-south runway and continue to have a grass area alongside of it. And a paved north-south runway would really lessen the traffic on east-west runway. I think you guys already know that, but with the prevailing winds out of the south, there'd be a lot of traffic that would move to the north-south runway. And it's largely undeveloped to the north of the airport, and it's a commercial area to the south. So not only would it shift traffic to a north-south direction, but it would put it over an area that's a lot less noise sensitive. So I'd really like to see that, but again, only paving the north-south runway, but finding a way to preserve grass. I'm also, we have unprecedented, what I think is unprecedented demand for additional hangar space. I think it's a testament to how well the airport's been developed so far. There's a lot of demand there, and I'd sure like to see additional hangars be developed. That's all I have.
Great, thank you for your comments. Why don't we move on to the next caller?
All right, next up is Rob Conheim. Sorry if I mispronounced that. You should be getting an opportunity to unmute here.
Okay, I hope you can hear me.
We can.
We can.
So my name is Rob Conheim. I live in the city of Middleton. I'm a former member of the city council. I do have a pilot's license, which I've held for more than 50 years, although I'm not an active pilot. And I was also a former member of the Airport Commission. So I have 2 questions with respect to the effects of the airport on the community. We know that the airport contributes to the economic well-being of Western Dane County in terms of businesses that are based here but use the airport to tend to other portions of their business outside of the immediate area. And in addition, businesses that are based elsewhere but that fly into Maury Airport to tend to the businesses that they have in the area. So my question is, do we know specifically what the economic benefit of the airport is to the towns of Middleton and the town of Springfield? My second question has to do with lead pollution in the atmosphere around the airport. Maury Airport has been quoted as being the second largest contributor of lead to the atmosphere in Dane County. But I've never seen any numbers to quote exactly what the lead concentration in the atmosphere is. Being the second largest contributor doesn't mean much if the total concentration in the atmosphere is minuscule. Furthermore, we know that rain washes lead out of the atmosphere. So one potential way, I suppose, to measure the lead contribution is to measure the lead in the groundwater in regions around the airport. That might be complicated by the fact that there's a former gunnery range just north of the airport that would have a lot of lead stuck in the ground that might be leaching into the groundwater. So those are my two questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Greg, would you have the ability to answer maybe or address the first question or maybe both questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only answer I could give to Robert's question right now is that an economic study was done by the Bureau of Aeronautics for the airport. And I guess I would reference him to that. I mean, that was not something Mead and Hunt did, but I'm aware that was done. So I think I would just have to refer you to that. And then in terms of the the lead contribution levels, I really cannot speak to that at this time. But I appreciate the comment. And Robert, I think that's all that I can really say at this point. Yeah.
No, I think that's fair. And just maybe a reiteration that if any project is proposed for changes at the airport, as part of that project, I believe some type of a full environmental study, I think it's called NEPA, would need to be performed at that time. And maybe that would address some of those answers as well, or start to address some of those questions as well, I guess I should say. So thank you for your call, or thank you. I keep calling it a call. I feel like I'm a talk show host. Thank you very much for your comments and questions. Why don't we move on to the next? Oh, actually, before we move on to the next raised hand, why don't we go back to the screen that says it looks like it's about 11 o'clock or a couple minutes after. Why don't we go to the screen that we remind people how they raise their hands? It's just a technicality of how to participate in this virtual meeting. If you're calling in via Zoom, please use the raise hand feature to raise your hand. I've said this a few times, but for those who may have joined late or not at the beginning, there's possibly different ways that you might find your raise hand feature depending on your type of computer and your level of your Zoom version. For a lot of people, it should be under reactions at the bottom of the screen, but it may alternatively be in the participants tab, or you may have to click on your own name to find the raise hand feature, and you will raise your hand to let us know you want to speak, and then when we call on you, we would ask you to unmute yourself at that time. If you are calling in via phone, please press *9 to raise your hand, and once we recognize you, please press *6 to unmute yourself. And again, just a reminder to everyone, please state your full name, your community of residence, and limit your questions or comments to 2 minutes. And then again, if you're really struggling, if there's a technical support question you have, or you're not getting through, having a problem, please call 608-443-0613. Thanks, and why don't we move back to taking a call, or recognizing the next hand up.
And Robert, I just want to mention, it is a little over 11 o'clock. We had talked about the potential of taking about a 5-minute bio break in case people want to just get up, stretch, move around, do whatever they need to do. Did you want to do that now?
I do. Yeah, please, not to put anybody on hold here, but I know I've been drinking a little bit of water here, so why don't we take 5 minutes to do that, stretch, get up, do whatever, and come back at, I guess it would be about 11:08, maybe 11:09, something like that. So let's take 5 minutes.
Okay, and Greg, maybe you want to put up the reminder screen while we're out, in case anybody wants to raise their hand in the meantime.
Okay, great. Thank you, and we'll be right back. But take this opportunity to stretch your back if you've been sitting for a long time. Thanks.
This is Mark Opitz, just to announce that the open house will continue in a couple minutes.
Okay, according to my computer, it is 11:09. So hopefully everybody got a chance to stretch for a moment. And hopefully I can bring back my team here to let's move on to the next call.
Okay.
Next
We're
hand.
up to Sven Kraus. Sven, you should be able to unmute.
Good morning, everyone. Sven Krause, town of Springfield, northwest of the airport on Highway K. I've been a resident in this community for 30+ years, and I'm now raising a young son who I plan to continue raising in this same community. And he happens to love being outdoors, of course, like any young child. I first off would just like to state on the record my complete disagreement with this airport expansion. And given the number of FAA violations that I personally see just from my location and report, and then continue to see, to me, it already demonstrates the inability of Maury Airport to safely maintain and manage the airport and the number of planes that are already existing in its present form. I also believe environmentally that this whole project is so contradictory to the many wetlands initiatives and protections and environmental interests, which the city of Middleton states that it places value on. I am deeply worried about the safety, health, and well-being of the families who have lived here for many, many years in the community, as well as plan to continue to live here. I think my rhetorical question is, this is Greg alluded early on to, that the volume of planes from a decibel level should not increase, and that the potential volume in terms of quantity of planes is to remain relatively unchanged. So it brings me to the question of what's the point of all this expansion? I think some of the emphasis was put on the safety of the pilots, which is of course important, but I think it comes at the cost and jeopardization of the health and ongoing safety of the many residents, family, and children that also live, play, and are active in this community. So it's just of interest to me that, given the amount of time and money and efforts all spent on this up to this point, combined with the significant amount of pushback that's already happened from residents, both pilots and non-pilots alike, it just seems kind of curiosity invoking that there are some particular self-serving interests at play here to a very select few. And I also believe that that should go against the values which the city of Middleton should demonstrate. So I think my question to Greg is more a rhetorical one, but in general, I would just like to voice my disagreement with the airport initiatives at play here.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sven. And I guess we will treat that as a rhetorical question and consider it part of the comments. So thank you for your comments. And why don't we move on to the next raised hand?
Okay, the next one is a phone caller. That is 608-824-9833. You should be able to press *6 to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Robert Bartholomew, Middleton. Just wanted to bring awareness about the problem with lead pollution. Parents with young children should be very concerned with the lead air pollution that exists here. The source is Maury Airport and its aviation activities, where planes repeatedly fly over schools, playgrounds, parks, and residences. Maury Airport accounts for 32% of the lead air pollution in Dane County. A Duke University study found a significant association between potential exposure to lead emissions from avgas and blood levels in children. A Columbia University study stated new findings reveal that even minuscule amounts of lead are extremely detrimental to child health. The city of Middleton owns the airport and responsibility for it, and the master plan being prepared does include a possible expansion of the runways and adding more hangars, which will make a very bad situation much worse. It may result in the arrival of commercial jet operations. If this concerns you, get informed, get organized with others, actively and persistently engage the city to express your opposition. Any expansion that will benefit the few and at the expense of the many, particularly children, should be a strong concern. The air we breathe should be as safe as the water we drink. One comment about the right-hand turns, 17 airports in Wisconsin already do it, so why not Middleton? That's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for your comments, Bob. Let's move on to the next raised hand.
Next up, we have Todd Burge.
Yeah, Bergie.
Thank
Can
you.
you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. Hey, appreciate it. I'm a pilot out there at Maury. I live more in Madison, but yeah, I fly one of the few jets that operates out of Maury. So I've got a pretty good vested interest in expanding the runway. And I just kind of wanted, this is more just comments on maybe how jets work, and just want to dispel some myths out there. First of all, I don't know if this is a myth, but I want to just make sure everybody knows that jets do not use leaded fuel. So yeah, could there be more jets out there if we expand the runway? There could be, but we do not use leaded fuel. But I certainly know that piston aircraft do. And Pamela Krill, as far as safety, and that's my biggest concern, that about safety. And is Maury safe now? Yes, it is. But would we like a bigger margin of safety? Absolutely. Jets, when it's hot out, we have a longer takeoff roll. I'm not going to get into the physics of it and the science of it, but yeah, 4,000 foot runway comes pretty quickly when it's 90 degrees out. And so I know that for my soft body here, I like having more runway, especially when it's hot out. And then of course it's Wisconsin, right? So when there's snow on the ground, it definitely makes me nervous bringing a jet in at a 4,000 foot runway. And again, also to have a paved north-south runway. Again, I'm not sure everybody understands how that works with the winds, and I'm not here to conduct a science class. But again, margin of safety is huge if we could have a paved north-south runway that was a little bigger. And then just the last thing, I don't want to get into a back and forth with people. I just was wondering, Mr. Kraus, I don't know if we probably can't talk back and forth like that, but maybe the moderators can tell me what the multiple FAA violations are out there. I've been flying Maury for 5 years. I personally haven't seen any FAA violations, so I'm not sure what that is, and if someone could speak to that. And that's it. That's all I've got.
Okay. Thank you for your comments and your question. And I personally am not aware of any FAA violations. I don't know if anybody else on the panel is. So I see shaking heads. Right now, yeah, I guess we're not aware of any FAA violations. So yeah, that's about all I can say about that. Why don't we move on to the next?
Robert, it's Mark Opitz. I will say that Rich Maury, as the airport manager, does collect noise complaints and just complaints in general. We have a noise complaint both hotline and a website that people can report complaints about operations. And Rich does look into them as airport manager. And from my understanding, very seldom are any of them, do they rise to what he would consider a level of potential FAA investigation. And then when the FAA has investigated, I don't want to speak for Rich. So I just would say that there might be a resource there that we could address at a future AMPAC meeting in terms of that question. So
that's a good
I just know that there's a process for collecting these complaints and that there is attempts to follow up, and I'm not aware of any outstanding issues.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Let's move on to the next raised hand.
Okay, next up is Richard Oberly. Richard, you should be able to unmute. There we go.
Morning, folks. Hey, my name is Richard Oberly. I am Town of Middleton Supervisor, seat number 1, and I will speak mainly for myself, but I probably represent many of the people's views here in the Town of Middleton. I heard today comments that we're using the same aircraft as today, and one of my thoughts is on good government. I know a future board cannot tie the hands, a past board cannot tie the hands of a future board, but when there is a promise made, and I remember the discussions back in 1998 about the runway being 4,000 foot, and there would be no jets. I was told by actually Supervisor Greg Held on the Town of Middleton board at that time, and that turned out to be a false promise from him, not knowing that 4,000 foot indeed was the minimum amount required for jets. So my comment is I would really appreciate if we would stick to the promise we made to the people back then, keep the airport where it is today, and forego the expansion. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks for your comments. Let's go on to the next raised hand.
Okay, next up is Gaurav Dogra. My sincere apologies if I I butchered that.
Oh, it's absolutely okay, Colleen. Hi, my name's Gaurav Dogra and I'm a pilot. I trained at Maury Middleton for the last 2 years, and I'm continuously getting more ratings and licenses. From day one, I was told about the importance of being a good neighbor. And I can tell you, it's very uncomfortable as a fresh pilot to take off from runway 28 and immediately turn right to 300. So this is something that we always keep in mind, that, we have neighbors around us and we want to be very conscientious about noise abatement, number one. Number two, I know that a lot of people have raised concerns about, the kids in the neighboring area being exposed to lead. All of us pilots are very astute about this kind of a thing. We want to make sure that we don't create a lot of pollution in any manner, noise or otherwise. I do want to raise a point that the local EAA chapter is heavily involved with the Young Eagles program in a way that we actually take kids, and a lot of times from underrepresented communities, and have them develop an interest in aviation, which helps with our STEM programs. Not all of our flying is just purely recreational or a hobby. A lot of us here care about making this a career, or even midlife changing our careers. I am all for the expansion of the airport, and as a current aircraft owner, I'll be the first person to rent or buy a hangar if we had more hangars. Just my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments.
I didn't catch what community the previous speaker is from.
Yeah, Gaurav, can you tell us where you kind of currently live in terms of what city?
Absolutely. I live in West Madison. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, let's move on to the next raised hand.
All right, next up, we have Ethan Brodsky. You're
Hey,
muted.
can people hear me?
Yep.
All right, my name is Ethan Brodsky, and I'm a resident of Madison, Wisconsin. I'm a private pilot with an aircraft based at Waunakee, though I learned to fly at Maury. Previously had my aircraft based at Maury, and intend to have a second aircraft based at Maury in the future. I'd like to point out that I fly with unleaded aviation gasoline and have since 2017. Unleaded aviation fuel has only become readily available recently, and only a small portion of the aircraft base at Maury actually required leaded gasoline. So any emission study that was done more than a couple of years ago that does not recognize the huge changings that are happening in that area do not have much predictive value. There could be pretty major reductions in the amount of leaded gasoline that's used at Maury if it was available there. The biggest changes I'd like to see are additional hangars and a lengthened north-south runway. There's a massive shortage of hangars at Maury right now and at all the aircrafts in the area, and more hangars would be good for the airport's economic development and sustainability. Extending the north-south runway to the north would allow more aircraft to use it, diverting a portion of the traffic that currently overflies urban residential areas east of the airport and rural residential areas west of the airport to sparsely populated agricultural areas to the north and commercial areas to the south, none of which mind that much about airplane noise. Much of the area surrounding the airport was historically wetlands and should remain undeveloped, as further development in that area with the associated impervious surfaces will cause additional runoff that will increase flooding in already developed areas of Middleton, a major problem that we've been seeing recently. An airport is a good thing to put in this spot because airports mostly involve open space, and no one really cares that much if the areas around the runway or even the runways themselves flood once in a while. I will point out, though, that it's absolutely essential that the airport retain a grass runway, and would be very disappointed to see the currently existing grass runways replaced solely with a paved one. I understand that there may be regulations that preclude formally having closely spaced parallel runways, and I'd like to see designated alternate operating areas or combined runways with partial width pavement, as is done at Waunakee. Eliminating the option to use grass will push out the recreational tail dragger aircraft and will inevitably be replaced with larger and louder aircraft. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Why don't we move on to, looks like there may be two callers in one here, Joe and Colleen G.
You should have opportunity to unmute yourself now.
Joe and or Colleen G. Can you unmute yourself?
Looks like you're still muted. You want to make sure that you're not double muted on both your device and through Zoom.
Okay. Why don't we leave them in the queue, but move on? We have had Paul Hudson speak before. Why don't we pick him anyway, just to see if he has somebody else with him who wants to speak. But Paul, since you've already spoken, unless it's somebody else.
Robert, no, I just wanted to, I do not. And so why don't you put me at the back of the queue? And if there's time permitting, I'd like to endorse, but also ask another question. So I'll come off.
Okay, thank you.
And next up, we have Kathy's iPad. And then I'll try to come back to Joe and Colleen after that and see if.
Hello.
Hello.
Can I go? All right.
Can hear you.
This is Catherine Wolf. I live at Hickory Trail, and that's town of Springfield. And we are not for any kind of airport expansion at this time. We've been very concerned with the level of expanded activities that we've already seen a pretty significant negative impact. We have planes flying over our home 450 feet above our house, which is very disruptive on a number of levels. You also have expansion now of 2 flight schools. So things are occurring despite the fact that the master plan hasn't even been completed. The winter flights is another area of concern. On a very foggy day, I will walk out to get the mail and I will be coughing from the amount of fumes that I'm exposed to just going to my mailbox. So there are some really negative effects that are occurring already, even before you're talking about adding more planes. We never used to have flights in the winter, so this has been pretty shocking. And I'm a gardener. I work outside all the time. Counting 80, 85 flights in the summer going right over our house is very disturbing. We're not in a noise abatement zone. 2 miles out, reportedly, I guess that's flight miles. Driving distance is 4.5 miles for us. The comments about the report, socioeconomic factors that were not addressed adequately, the impact of the cost benefit analysis. It's hard to talk in 2 minutes. The cost of ameliorating lead in the aquifer that supports all of our wells. There's an aquifer right under the airport. The costs of ameliorating polluted water from the airport that goes into Pheasant Branch. This is all one big waterway. It's all connected with groundwater. The mental health factors that have affected all of us out here with this constant worry of planes potentially losing control, especially given all the flight schools and crashing into one of our homes. What about the costs of reduced property values? That was not listed in the Mead and Hunt report under socioeconomic factors. Values of our homes are anywhere from 25 to 30% reduced, depending on how low these planes are flying over our houses. And where is, let me just, yes.
Yeah, I'm giving you your 2 minutes are up. I'm giving you time to wrap up.
Okay. The other concern would be, what about the liability for the city? Where is the money identified that covers an accident that occurs into our homes? Or I have driven past the airport. I've had flights wobbly come in right over my car. Who's going to cover those kinds of crashes that inevitably are going to occur as everything keeps expanding here? So I didn't get to all my points, but hopefully someone else will.
Okay. I guess I mostly heard comments there. Were there, did anybody, I mean, I did hear a question about who's going to pay for, if a plane crashes into somebody's home. I would assume that would be the plane owner's insurance.
Doesn't the city have liability insurance?
I believe
it's a city-owned airport, correct?
Yes, but I think the airport's not going to crash into your house. It would be an airplane, and I think the way the liability would work would be an individual aircraft owner's insurance would be what covers that. But I didn't hear any. That was the main question I heard. So I would take the rest as comments. And I think we can move on to the next. Oh, actually,
I don't think that's correct. I would like a legal opinion on that. That
well,
is a question.
okay. Then I cannot give a legal opinion, and that will have to be something that would be addressed at a future, some type of future discussion then. So yeah, I guess I can't answer a legal question. Why don't we take this moment? It is 11:30. Why don't we take this moment to go back to the slide to remind people how to do this? Use the raise hand feature. If you're calling from a computer, you'll want to find that under the reactions tab, I guess at the bottom of your screen. Or if you don't have it there, alternatively, it might be under the participants tab, or possibly click on your name to find the raise hand feature. And then when we call on you, we'll give you an opportunity to unmute yourself. If you're calling in via phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. Please state your full name, community of residence, and limit your questions or comments to 2 minutes. And if you have technical questions where it's just not working for you, please call 608-443-0613. Why don't we go to the next raised hand now?
And I did see, it looks like Joe and Colleen G finally were able to unmute. So why don't we go to them and then we'll go back to the next raised hand.
Perfect.
Okay, I haven't got participants up. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Okay. I'm going to talk first, and my wife is going to follow up afterwards. The airport, I'm totally against the airport.
Sorry, could you please state your name and your community of residence?
Joe Getty and City and Middleton Township, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And I'm totally opposed to changes to the airport that equal only more noise and more pollution, with zero changes for improvement of those conditions. I am not against anything to do maintenance or to improve the current operation, but I'm against changes that will bring more pollution and more noise. Good example of this is the raise the ramp, or whatever you're calling it. I don't understand how, with all the problems and complaints, that bringing 100 additional airplanes in here over a weekend will do anything to appease or make it better for the citizens of this area. It does more to irritate them. And I don't even understand how that was approved through the City of Middleton if the City of Middleton council members are truly working for a good neighborhood. And I wonder how many people are aware that one of the new airport hangar extension areas will involve the removal of Penny Klein Park, or a portion of it, and possibly the dog park itself as well. Also, there was a question about the amount of lead that's put down. It's about 247 pounds of lead per year, and it's atomized air, which is easier to absorb in soil and skin and breathing and everything else. And I guess one thing I'd like to know is a question, since we know that the Mead and Hunt chart on air pollution was truncated, not identifying the true noise levels for the towns of Springfield and Middleton in comparison to what they should be, will that slide be changed and corrected for the current and future presentation? That's my main question at this point in time. Oh, I know. The other thing too, other question I have is relating to this raise the ramp. Is there anything that
your 2 minutes is up? Kind of wrap it up, okay?
Is there anything that you're going to do to include the safety with 100 additional planes using the airport to take off and land over that weekend without any type of main control.
Okay, thanks, Joe. We'll before we call on Colleen, why don't we, the first question that was asked, is there an ability or an intent to change the noise? I think there was a noise graph that was
Yes,
part of
that's
the
correct.
presentation.
That is correct.
And is there any intent to maybe
To correct that by putting
Yeah,
the proper
I got it.
chart in.
Joe, I got it. Let me open it up to Mead and Hunt. Is there
Yeah,
something
maybe-
there that could be changed to make sure that we capture an entire graph?
And maybe just a follow-up question for Joe. I have it up here now. I'm just looking at the noise presentation. Was there one particular slide that?
It is one particular side.
Okay.
And this isn't it. It showed the different noise levels with for different types of environments.
Joe, do you know if that was in the actual draft master plan, or was that in the presentation? Because sometimes the presentations, you might take snippets of things from the master plan report.
I'm not sure, but wherever it was, it gave the wrong indication of what the true effect would be on our areas of Springfield and Middleton townships.
If we can find that, we'll try to make sure that it's the complete chart. If we can't find it, and you find it, maybe you can send an email to me or
I will
somebody.
be happy to copy it and send it to you. Okay.
Yeah, please do.
That's the
That'd be
best I
great.
can do.
Okay, that'll help us identify it. And then,
Thank you.
Robert, do you want to repeat the email address or Greg?
Well, I think he said he's not going to email it. I think he said he would send it, which I took as meaning.
I was going to email it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Thank you. Otherwise, you can call me and we can make sure that we get it from you in some way, shape, or form.
Or yeah, you can send it to my city email address too, which is district2 at cityofmiddleton.us. Or you can email the project team. That might be better. It's C29 masterplan at meadhunt.com. That may be one of the best emails to reach us at, because that is specific to this project.
Okay, I've got it.
Great.
C29 master schedule. I'm sorry. Say it again. Master plan.
C29 master plan at meadhunt.com.
Okay. I made my app funny.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay.
Why don't we move on? Why don't we move on to your wife?
Okay.
Give her a chance to speak.
Hi, my name is Colleen Getty, and I am a resident of Middleton Township. And the question I would like to ask is, with all the concerns that people have raised about the safety and noise concerns, is it possible for the airport to give an order to pilots to make a right-hand turn upon takeoff? And that is my question.
Oh, great. Yeah, that is one of the things that is being considered by the AMPAC committee. So we are looking at that, and that's certainly one of our options, is to kind of mandate or request that the city change this to a right hand only turn type of thing when taking off. So yeah, it's a consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next raised hand.
All right, next up we have Bruce Case.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, Bruce Case, Town of Middleton resident and also a hangar owner at the airport. I've read with great interest the concern about lead. I need to explain that in my career, I build pipe organs, and pipe organs are essentially lead pipes. And so I work with solid lead, liquid lead, gaseous lead on a daily basis. And I've done that for 42 years. So, you know, I have concern about lead. I've also read the report that has been submitted about lead levels. And what's interesting is that when you actually read the entire report, you'll see the conclusion is that lead levels, when you get 0.6 miles away from the airport, are not measurable. And so I drive from the Middleton Airport 0.6 miles going west, and I'm barely into the suburbs that surround the airport. So lead, not a measurable level according to the study. I have a concern about it. Lead is a problem, but I've been flying for years. I'm at the airport probably 20 hours a week now because I'm working on projects in my hangar. So I get a lead level test on my blood every year because of what I do. Last week, I got the results back. It was actually below what they consider measurable levels. So I have no issue dealing with lead at a far more intense level than most people. And the report that was produced indicates that it really is not a concern when you look at the distances that are involved. So I just want to point out, you know, issues about lead.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Let's move on to the next raised hand.
Next up, we have Steve Waldorf. Steve, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah, Steve Waldorf, 7480 Indigo Circle in Town of Middleton. It's been stated in on this today even that there's airport noise complaint hotline and website. Richard Morey, the airport manager, has readily admitted in past meetings that there's no way to police unsafe flying rule-breaking pilots. There's just no consequences or fines to rule breakers. Morey can only talk to those pilots and tell them the concerns that people are having. Airport flights noise will increase, obviously, with this expansion. The airport commission has said there is no rule saying pilots must file a flight plan at all with the current plan or the plan in the future. This means jets can fly at all hours of the night. Again, there's no rules on flight hours. This is going to be noise at night, unregulated. There's no tower talk at all for this plan. This is one of the reasons why noise is probably going to increase, and this is why I'm against the expansion of the airport. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Let's take the next raised hand.
Let's see. I see Blake Day, but I believe that we already heard from Blake. So
Actually, I don't have. Oh yeah, I guess I do have Blake on my list.
Okay, so
why don't we move him to the bottom, which is, but Blake, actually, I'm gonna put your hand down and then just raise it again because we're getting to the end of our thing, and I got a feeling we're not going to have time for second raised hands. Thanks.
So
but we'll see what we get to.
next one is a phone line, 608-220-4311. You should be able to unmute now with *6. We can't hear you yet, so. *6 to unmute. Phone number 608-220-4311.
This is David Bryce, Town of Middleton. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hear you. What was your last name?
Bryce, B-R-Y-C-E.
Thank you.
My statement is the most important part of the statement is on the first paragraph. I know there's been a lot of statements, but I want to reiterate what Bob Bartholomew has said. Current operations at Maury Airport present a significant health risk, especially to children, in contrast to what you've been hearing. In an extensive study from Duke University, Miranda and Associates looked at 66 airports in 6 counties in North Carolina using a geospatial analysis of lead levels in children. They found that there was a significant incidence of higher blood levels in children residing within 1,000 meters of the airport. These lead levels were even higher with children living within 500 meters of the airport. Now, this is the statement. The current lead emissions produced by Maury Airport are 2 to 3 times greater than the average lead emissions from the 66 airports in this study. Let me reiterate, they were 2 or 3 times greater than the average lead emissions from the 66 airports in this study. There's no safe level of lead in humans. I'm on to the second paragraph. Lead in children is harmful at all levels, which affects intelligence, neurodevelopment, social skills, and memory. And it will lead to a permanent loss in IQ. Studies have confirmed that ADHD is associated with blood lead levels at very low exposure amounts. It seems under the current circumstances, the many, if not all, the children living or attending school within 1,000 meters of this airport have, for any significant period of time, will experience an increase in blood lead levels. The city of Middleton has recently supported the construction of many apartments and family residences
Hey,
in close
David,
proximity.
can you wrap it up? Your 2 minutes are up now.
Many appear to be within 500 meters of the airport. Maury Airport in its current operational form is a serious threat to the health of the entire community, especially the children. Not only should it be expected, not only should it not be expanded, the city plans should be aimed to immediately toward the removal of any lead-producing flights at this airport. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your comments, David. Why don't we take this moment to say it is 11:47. I think we're going to have to say we're going to get to all the people who currently have their hands raised who have not spoken before. After that, I don't think we can. I mean, we're basically coming to an end here. So why don't we? Well, let me say this: if you have not yet spoken, raise your hand right now. But basically, we're going to cut off who can speak, but we will stay till we've gotten all the raised hands who are new to the call. But raise your hand now because we're coming up on kind of our noontime end stop, and we'll stay a little longer. But that's just probably like 10 or 15 or 20 minutes longer. Thanks.
And Robert, I believe you still intend to read the comments into the record.
Yeah, and I still have to read the comments into the record. So I'm going to do that after we've gotten to all the people who have not yet spoken, who raised their hand, and just added a few people. So let's, okay, we're not going to take any new calls after the 11, actually maybe 10, because I think Blake's already spoken. We're not going to take any new calls after the 10 that are hand raised up now. Thanks.
Okay, so Robbie K, you are next. You should be able to unmute.
How does that sound?
We can hear you.
Let me just keep it very, very quick. In all the meetings I've attended to, I haven't quite heard this addressed, and I've seen you guys just gloss over it today as well. But many times it's come up, the decrease in property values that you all have quite willfully inflicted upon us. any intentions to do anything about that? If not, how do you feel about having destroyed people's lives? Anything at all?
Okay, Robbie, I'm going to treat that as a comment rather than
No, it's a question.
I
asked you quite clearly, do you have any intentions to do anything about lowering people's property values?
I'm going to, I don't think there can be an answer to a question that
Well, goodbye.
I believe there's certain assumptions that you state there that I disagree with to begin with. So I don't have an answer for you today. So let's move on. We'll record your comments into the record. Thanks.
Next up, we have Deb Newman. Deb.
Okay, yeah, thank you. My name is Deb Newman, obviously. I'm in the town of Springfield. I live 3 miles west of the airport. So I have a question. I just want something clarified. I try really hard to get all the facts and understand before I make my assumptions and opinions. So I want to clarify something that Greg Stern stated in the presentation. So what I thought I heard you say, and I wrote it down, I write down verbatim, is I thought you said, we see an increase in B-2 aircraft in the future. And you stated, as I heard you, you said it could go up to the 2010 levels. Is that true?
Yeah, thank you, Deb. I'll go back to an earlier slide in the presentation here to address your question there. And maybe even the slide before would help. So, when we're talking about the difference between B1 and B2 aircraft, we're not talking about differences in the speed of the aircraft, the B component. What we're talking about is the difference in the size of the aircraft, 1 versus 2, and that being the wingspan. So again, B2 aircraft do operate at the airport today, and some examples of the ones that do operate are like the Citation CJ2 and the Beech King Air 90. In terms of the projections and historic levels of Group 2 aircraft, the most recent period when they've eclipsed what the FAA defines as regular use, and that being 500 annual operations, the last time that occurred at Middleton was back in 2010. And I think Cynthia had asked maybe earlier, where did that number come from? That 696 operations is right out of the forecast chapter. And we're talking Group 2 operations. So I think there were also some C2 operations and likewise, but that's all the Group 2 operations. And you can see they've dropped quite a bit. 2010 was the high, and right after that, they dropped below that regular use threshold of 500 operations. And 2019 was actually one of the lower years. However, the fact that they have been above 500 operations in the past, coupled with the fact that B2 aircraft still operate there today, we didn't think it was unreasonable over the next 20 years, and this master plan looks out 20 years, for that to occur again, for those operations to again eclipse the 500 operations threshold. So we don't see it occurring in the 5, 10, or even the 15, but out on those outer limits of the forecast horizon, we are projecting, that those B2 operations would get back similar, not as high as the 2010, but that they would come back. Now, I hope that answers your question. And this is coming straight out of the forecast chapter, which talks about this in a little bit more detail. But I'm hoping that answers your question.
Well, it does, because in the B2 class are the turboprops and the jets, correct?
Primarily, yeah. I mean, I think there are some turboprops that are probably in Group 1, and I think the chapter lists each aircraft and its size and category specifically, and their number of operations over the past 10 years. So I think if you really wanted to get into it, there's a table in the forecast chapter that that really shows how by aircraft, how the operations have.
Okay,
been.
thank you.
Yep.
And so I would then like to follow up with a comment that everyone, has different concerns. My concern being west of the airport is that it's mainly the jets and turboprops that come in from the west on approach to the airport. They go directly in from the west. And a lot of times we've all got flight tracker apps. I know that there are different, things we have to be careful using those, but they're coming in way lower, and a lot of times than they probably should. They don't seem to be following the noise abatement procedures either. So that brings me to the conclusion that if thinking that this may get to be more in number, I can't, that's not something that I can support as far as an expansion of the east-west runway. So just
Okay.
wanting to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Let's move on to the next raised hand.
All right, that would be Steve. No last name given, just Steve. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay. My name is Steve Sperling. I live on Hickory Trail in the town of Springfield. And I do support the right-hand turn going north for planes taking off. I haven't heard anything from people who live in that direction telling me that that's a problem, but certainly the planes flying west over our house and over our the many houses in our area is a problem. I also have some pretty serious concerns regarding the Rock the Ramp. I don't know whether it's gone through the regular procedures that other events would have to go through, but I'm concerned about the number of planes, additional planes that would be flying in on a particular day. I'm not clear about issues related to alcohol and people flying. And I'm concerned about what benefits there are to the community for an event that would bring a serious number of additional planes into the area for a day. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Steve. Let's go to the next raised hand.
That would be Franz, F-R-O-N-T-Z. You should be able to unmute yourself. Looks like you're unmuted, but we don't hear you quite yet. You want to make sure you're not double muted if you've got a mute setting on your device as well as Zoom.
Can you guys hear me okay now?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Hi, I'm Stephanie Franz, town of Middleton, and I am a fairly new resident in the Highwood Circle neighborhood, like right by the airport. So we knew moving here, we would experience some noise and such, but we also knew in purchasing our home that there was an agreement to keep the runway at the length it was. So now we're kind of shocked to find out that that promise might be broken. Within the past few months, though, the noise has gotten progressively worse. There's been like really loud planes and jets at inappropriate times during the week for more than 15 minutes at a time. And then when those maps came out from Mead and Hunt, like about a month or two ago, showing the recommended flight paths, we were kind of surprised to see that, they didn't really seem reflective of the planes that we actually see flying over our neighborhood, and that actual flight data wasn't being used for those maps. So I know, as another person mentioned, traffic's increasing, it doesn't seem to be regulated, and are going at all hours and days of the night. But it's also a little alarming to us that air quality and the lead discussions weren't deemed relevant or important enough to be included in the environmental report. So as far as the cost analysis, I think Greg also mentioned that, once that will be done, once the next steps have been agreed upon, but isn't it a little far down the road in the process to be doing those? I just think that that's something that you would do earlier on in the process to see if something's actually feasible or not before you got too far down in the process. I guess the last thing I'll say is, as a member of the public that regularly listens into those AMPAC meetings, it just kind of feels like few people on the committee actually have the public's interests or public safety at the forefront. So I hope that some action is actually going to be taken from this open house to ensure that, we're heard and our opinions are considered. So I do have a question on that regard. It's just kind of, what are you guys going to do as far as these public concerns? Initially, like in those first 8 questions, as someone said, there were no names. So how do we know, you're tracking these, you're going to take action on them, or are we just, is this kind of just a saving face? Like, yeah, we heard the public, but we're going to do this.
Okay, thank you for your comments and your question. To answer the question at the end, we're recording this open house, and we are Mead and Hunt is going to be writing down all the questions asked and the concerns raised that can be part of the consideration for AMPAC. So your questions and comments are being heard.
Can we expect like a response or an email or something with the answers to the questions, or
not individually? No, it's going to be, we as a group will consider, we'll get a report of the comments, concerns, questions that come up, and we'll try to group them into concerns, but we're not going to address people individually.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Why don't we move on to the next raised hand?
Next up, we have Richard Morey.
All right, am I unmuted?
You are.
You are.
Okay. Richard Morey, I currently live in Wanakee because I couldn't afford to buy a house in the town of Middleton, or city of Middleton for that matter. The no build option has always been on the table. It started off that way at the first AMPAC meeting. The state stated it, Josh. So that's not accurate that has just been added. People are equating aircraft flying, not flying the noise abatement procedure with unsafe activity or violation of the FAA rules. This is not the case. If an aircraft follows the standard FAA pattern, they're not going to be climbing out or as off over to the northwest, throttling back and then turning across wind. They're going to turn relatively early. If they're taking off to the east, they're going to fly out over the city and then turn versus turning over the highway as they are requested to do at this time. These are not unsafe actions. They are simply following standard FAA procedures. Our noise abatement procedure is different than standard, and we do our best to encourage people to do so. So equating, that's been a problem. People misunderstand what a noise abatement procedure actually is. Runway, you can equate the runway with the road. This is a part of infrastructure. The city has no control per se over what's going on that road at that moment. Actually, they have far more control in a way because you have speed limits and the rest, but you're not going to close a road one day out of the week or at certain hours. Let's see, let's go back into just lead in historical perspective. There was lead in automotive fuel until 1980. Since that time, there have been a 98% reduction in lead in the atmosphere. A number of us were alive in 1980 and managed to live through this. Perhaps that explains some of the behavior of some of us, but in any case, right now we're running on minuscule amounts in the atmosphere.
And Richard, your 2 minutes are up, so if you can kind of wrap it up.
Okay. I guess that's basically it. There's just been a few things that were stated that were, again, not accurate, and I was trying to expand that. So thank you much for your time. This has been a very productive meeting as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Actually, I think we can open up Kathy's iPad again, but I think we've heard from Kathy before. Let's just double check that she doesn't have somebody else with her that wants to speak. Kathy, can you unmute yourself? Your hand is up, but I believe you've already spoken.
I've given Kathy permission to unmute. not seeing that she's unmuting, so.
I think it's, yeah, Kathy. Okay.
On
One
then.
last time, if you have somebody else with you, please unmute and go ahead and ask your question. Otherwise, we need to, and I just see somebody else jumped in who was not on our list earlier. We're really not taking new comments, but we'll continue through with the people we had on our list. I think the next one is the telephone number.
Yep, next is 608-640-6505, *6 to unmute yourself. Looks like you're unmuted. You can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
This is Wayne Rounds Jr., Town of Middleton resident. I'd just like to encourage the AMPAC group to seriously look at a possible change to the right-hand pattern. And I think it would help eliminate a lot of the, certainly the noise complaints and some of the safety complaints. I have a question for either Mr. Stern or Mr. Holbrook. My recollection is there are 12 to 13 untowered airports in the state of Wisconsin with a right pattern. Can you tell me the number of airports that have a right pattern that are not towered?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure of the number. I know Bob Bartholomew was on earlier and had mentioned 17. I know there are around that amount. I mean, I think there's 100 airports in the state roughly, and so. But you're right. There are some that do have right-hand traffic patterns.
And I did give Josh the opportunity to unmute if he has anything to share.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that off the top of my head, but it's something I could dig and get for you.
Are Verona and Blackhawk and Dane County right patterns?
Like, I personally don't know the patterns of every airport. I would have to, I wrote it down. I can find that answer for you.
So
I grew up around aircraft most of my life. My late father was a pilot. I have had air ground school, but I never made the jump to get a license. I don't think anybody here that I've ever talked to has want to shut down the Maury facility. Good facility. But one last comment as far as leaded fuel, I would hope the city of Middleton, as part of this AMPAC, would maybe make a contribution to try to direct contribution to try to put in some fuel storage facilities for unleaded fuel. I'm a farmer in the town of Middleton. Years ago, we had to give up leaded fuel for our high compression tractor engines and industrial engines. So we too had to give it up. You are one of the last users of it, and I think you ought to keep that in perspective. And I understand high compression engines, and I understand the arguments why it's needed. But
okay, thanks, Wade.
Everything does change.
You're sorry. Your 2 minutes. Your 2 minutes is up. So
thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you, Wade. I do appreciate it. Why don't we go on to the next caller?
Next up, we've got Kate.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Kate Stapleton. I'm a Town of Middleton resident. My concerns are that there's no plans to regulate aircraft for the noise. I've lived next to big and small airports, and the idea of having quiet hours at night or restrictions on what you can do during, evening is not unheard of. And my question is, why isn't there any system in place to take care of pilots who don't follow the noise abatement policies? And seems like it's just kind of a suggestion, like, please don't walk on the grass. Is there any sort of thing to back that up?
Thank you for your question. The answer is that there are rules, kind of like it's kind of like if you're driving your car, maybe there's a speed limit, that's the law. And if you're going too fast, you can be pulled over, and that's like that's federal stuff the FAA takes care of. This noise abatement is a local thing where we're trying to ask our pilots to do certain things that are different from the law, to try to mitigate the noise, be nice to neighbors. But if they don't know about our preferences or our procedures, they're not enforceable. I don't know if anybody else on the panel wants to address that topic, but
Well, I
in short,
I
sure.
understand that, what you're saying is like, people who don't regularly fly to the airport don't know and stuff like that. But if we increase the runway size and the amount of planes, the size of planes coming in, eventually that's going to become more than a serious problem. It's going to become a big issue for us who are living near it, and it's going to have untold effects on our lives. And I think that's something that you guys should seriously consider, is to look forward. Like, now it's a problem and it's annoying, but further down the road, who knows what it'll turn into. My
Okay.
other question
Well, Kate,
is,
I would try to wrap it up. Then your 2 minutes are actually, I was counting. Yeah, but try to wrap it up.
is there any plans going forward to deal with planes that need de-icing and those chemicals?
I believe they when they're de-iced, we don't use. One of the comments that I remember from AMPAC was somebody was concerned that we were using, oh geez, what's the name of the chemical that people are worried about in fire extinguishers? But that it was confirmed that we don't have. I mean, de-icing needs to happen. Sorry, Mark.
Isn't it PFAS?
PFAS. Yeah, we don't. My understanding is that we don't use PFAS for de-icing. So that's the good news. But if a plane needs de-icing, there are ways that you can de-ice a plane without using PFAS.
But what about the water supply by the airport that feeds all our wells?
Again, we're not using PFAS, so we're not, and this isn't, sorry, your comment period is over. So I just wanted to try to address your question. You were concerned about de-icing. De-icing is, at least what I understand is that we're not using this thing that most people right now are concerned about, is PFAS. So, that I can say, if de-icing does take place, just like you have to de-ice your car windshield, that doesn't mean that your windshield wiper fluid has PFAS in it. So hopefully that helps.
Robert, Rich Morey has his hand up. He may have.
I guess I wouldn't let Rich Morey talk again if he was just raising up a point, but Rich, I'm calling on you to help answer this particular de-icing question.
Yes, we do not do chemical de-icing at this facility. Neither Capital Flight nor Maury Airplane Company uses anti-icing mixture that you'll see at Dane County Regional when they're spraying down a jet. When we have aircraft that are iced up, we bring them in our hangar and let them melt off. There've been some confusion about the weeping wing technology that is used when an aircraft is actually flying to reduce or eliminate the icing on the wings. That is essentially using the same type of chemical that you have in your car radiator. And it's used at a very small level, and it's done actually not on the ground, but once in the air. So we really have no issue along those lines. We're not using the chemicals, so we don't have a problem with it.
Great. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Richard. Okay, thank you for your comments, Kate. And I think we're moving on to the last raised hand here, which is Dave D.
Dave D, you should be able to unmute.
You guys hear me?
We can.
Good. Just wanted to say I live in the city of Madison. I've been involved with Maury Airport for probably 3 years. I wanted to say that the training with Rich and with Capital Flight is exceptional. Everything is focused on safety in my experience. I've been able to go through and get my private and my instrument. Now I'm working on my commercial. From a safety perspective, if you want to increase safety, I'm in favor of a north-south runway. There's many times when you can't get into Maury and you have to go Mist and go into Madison, and the next day come back in and get, you know, your rental plane or whatever back to Maury. So if you want to sort of minimize some extra traffic, a north-south runway might help. It seems like everybody likes airplanes and things like that when they want to take a trip somewhere, but you have to understand pilots need to be trained somewhere, and there's a whole lot of training that goes on at Maury, and you can't take a trip unless we have trained pilots, and there's a whole lot of pilots retiring right now because of what we just went through. We need to continue to train pilots, and that can't all happen at Madison. All right. I've been flying for 3 years. I'm approaching 1,000 hours. I always do the noise abatement procedures every time I fly, and that's out of respect for the neighbors. Everybody at Maury that I know is trying to be friendly to all the neighbors, and I think it would just help if we could all respect each other, which I know on the pilot side we're desperately trying to do. So thanks so much, everybody, for investing your time.
Okay. Dave, thank you for your comments. Can we get your last name for the record? Dave,
Yeah, I had to unmute again. It's Ducommun, Ducommun.
Okay, great. Thank you for your comments, Dave.
Thank you.
That is the last raised hand I see. So for new speakers, so we are past the 12 o'clock stopping point, but I'm going to ask that we can, first of all, for those who need to leave, because we are past 12 o'clock, thank you for attending this open house virtually. Secondly, I am going to stay on to read comments that had been submitted in advance. So anybody who wants to hear these comments is more than welcome to stay on, but the rest of the meeting will be basically hearing my voice as I read these comments, I believe. So unless...
Robert, this is Mark Opitz. I was just gonna add one thing here. There will be future public input opportunities. This wasn't the last opportunity for you to speak. We mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting, but if you joined us in progress, I wanted to, there we go. Thank you. That's exactly the slide I wanted to have up. So why don't we have that up for a moment here, Robert?
And not only that, why don't I read it out loud, because there are a few people who have called in and might not be able to see the screen. So this is other ways for people to participate. If you have not had a chance to speak, or you had to leave before you were called on, you may submit your questions or comments by emailing the project team at the following email address. It is c29masterplan@meadhunt.com. You can also get a comment form from our open house webpage, or you can get a comment form at the airport terminal, or you can also call the following telephone number to leave your comments or questions that can be that if we get them by April 20th at 4:30 p.m., we'll add your comments or questions to our report. The telephone number is 608-821-8394. And as I just said, questions and comments provided by Tuesday, April 20th at 4:30 p.m. will be acknowledged in a report prepared for the next Airport Master Plan Advisory Committee, or AMPAC, meeting. The report will also be made available on the Master Plan webpage and shared with city leadership for consideration in the final Master Plan recommendations. The City of Middleton will also provide further opportunities for public input regarding the Airport Master Plan, both at meetings and through distribution of a community survey prior to completion and adoption of the master plan. So hopefully there are still ways that if you have additional questions or comments, you can reach out and get your questions or comments registered prior to Tuesday, April 20th at 4:30 p.m. by, again, emailing us at c29masterplan@meadhunt.com, calling us at 608-821-8394, or by submitting a comment form that you can get from the webpage or from the airport terminal building. So thank you very much. Again, for those who need to leave, I really appreciate everybody's participation today. For those who want to stick around, there are some comments that had been presented to us earlier that I'm going to read so that people can hear these comments. So thank you. Okay. Comment number 1 from a Town of Middleton resident. I have been actively opposed to expansion plans for the Middleton Airport as it became clear this serves the interests of a few corporations and individuals that do not understand the impact this will have on these neighborhoods. The increase in flight frequency, subsequent noise, added pollution, and increased danger are of major concern. No lengthening or addition of runways as was a promise made by the city of Middleton that must not be broken. Additionally, there should be no additional hangars allowed, as this can only lead to further congestion and additional flights over heavily residential neighborhoods. Leaving the airport as is and promoting the right turn away from the residential areas is a proper solution to this issue that requires constant notation sent in about noise and low flights. Please stop the idea of expansion. And again, that was from a Town of Middleton resident. Comment number 2. Attached is a letter sent, I'm sorry, this was, well, I'll just read the whole thing in the order it's on the screen. Attached is a letter sent in November 2020 to the Town of Springfield Board regarding the airport master plan, which includes the sentiments of my neighbors in Bridle Ridge in the Town of Springfield. Please include this letter in the official public record for the open house scheduled for 4/10/21. I may not be able to attend the open house and wanted to make sure that this was included. And the letter that is referenced in this email said, letter to Jim Pulvermacher, Chairman, Town of Springfield Board. Dear Chair Pulvermacher, we understand that the City of Middleton is preparing its 20-year master plan for the Middleton Municipal Airport, and as part of this plan, lengthening the primary east-west runway is one of the options being considered. We appreciate that just because an option is included in the master plan does not mean that it will actually come to fruition. However, we are concerned that the city would even consider lengthening this runway, given how congested the area west of the airport has become in the last 20 years. Indeed, our neighborhood was developed in part on the city's promise back when it first purchased the airport that it would not extend the primary runway beyond 4,000 feet. Okay, comment 2 continued. Bridle Ridge and the surrounding neighborhoods would be significantly negatively impacted should the city choose to lengthen the primary runway. Doing so would most certainly result in more air traffic over our homes, meaning an increase in noise and low overflights. Our quality of life would therefore be negatively affected. In addition, the value of our homes would undoubtedly diminish, and the amount of time it would take to sell our homes would likely increase as well. For most of us, our homes are our biggest investment, and so if the city were to pursue this option, we will be forced to consider legal action to protect our investment. We understand that the town board has requested a closed session meeting with the City of Middleton officials to discuss this matter. We hope the town and the city can agree that lengthening the primary runway is not necessary and will cause negative repercussions for those living in the surrounding area. Because we feel the City of Middleton has not been open to hearing our concern, we are hopeful that by bringing these concerns to you, our elected officials, you will represent our interests as you work with the city to resolve this matter. And I guess that letter was from a Town of Springfield, or maybe multiple Town of Springfield residents.
So Robert, there's 9 comments in total. Some are multiple pages like this.
Okay.
So we'll go on to comment 3 here.
Okay. Comment 3 of 9, it sounds like, and some of them are shorter and some of them are longer. Comment number 3 is the Master Plan Advisory Committee, MPAC, put the cart before the horse in this whole planning process. Rather than seek input from the public at the onset as they should have, they began planning to expand the airport with pilots and personnel at the airport being the first to offer input. Capital Flight went so far as to encourage out-of-state pilots who do not even use the airport to participate in an airport user survey in order to skew the results toward expansion. Conversely, a survey was never conducted with everyday taxpayers in the community. Furthermore, the town of Middleton and town of Springfield has had to fight to get representation on the Master Plan Advisory Committee. Letters signed by both towns expressing option to the airport were even ignored by the city of Middleton. Recently, the town of Middleton representative was summarily dismissed from the committee because she pointed out policies put forth as fact by members of the MPAC. That's the comment. And the only thing I will comment on is we actually do have 2 representatives from the town of Springfield and 1 representative from the town of Middleton on MPAC. Comment number 3 continued. The question that comes to mind over and over again in this whole process is this: why are pilots, a minority of the population, in charge of making decisions for the majority of the populace? If the general population really is so keen to approve this airport expansion, then why doesn't the city of Middleton open it up for the city of Middleton, town of Middleton, and town of Springfield to vote on it? Instead, the MPAC has continued to ignore and silence the voices of everyday people who will be most affected by this expansion. I call on every one of the city board members to leave this decision to those most affected by airport expansion. Let the city of Middleton, town of Middleton, and town of Springfield vote on this. Town of Middleton residents is who this is sent by. And I'll just note that the question that's embedded in this comment was addressed at the beginning of our public open house today as a question that came in. So we addressed it there, but I wanted to read it here in context as part of the comment. Okay, next comment, please.
Okay, comment 4, and this one also spans 2 slides.
Okay, thank you. I do not support expanding Morey Airport operations or facilities. The city of Middleton should honor its commitments in resolution 1008-20, intent for Morey Airport property. I am concerned about the Morey Airport piston-driven aircraft leaded aviation gas emissions, particularly the adverse health impacts of lead emissions in well water and on children, including impacts such as permanent loss of IQ. I do not support building 100 by 100 corporate-sized hangars at Morey Airport, especially in the vicinity of the Highwood Circle Estates subdivision in the town of Middleton. I do not support the city of Middleton's use of eminent domain to take land, including prime agricultural land, from private property owners to expand Morey Airport. I do not support lengthening the paved 4,000-foot runway to the west. And then comment number 4 continued. I do not support any construction of a paved runway to the north to attract heavier commercial aircraft to Morey Airport. Specifically, I do not support the construction of any paved runway to the north. I do support urging pilots to follow flight patterns over commercial and industrial areas and away from residential areas. And again, that comment came in from a town of Middleton resident.
Okay. Next comment is comment 5, and this is just 1 page.
Okay, thank you. Comment number 5, I support the extension of runway 1028 and also the paving and extension of runway 119. These improvements would provide more takeoff and landing options and also increase safety for pilots in various wind conditions. All of the pilots I know are well aware of regulations and noise abatement procedures and follow them whenever possible and safe to do so. Having a more useful north-south runway would also lessen the number of takeoffs and landings over the same neighborhood and possibly reduce noise complaints. I live in an area that is used extensively for C-29 students and practice flights and have no issue with aircraft noise. And this was submitted by a town of Cross Plains resident.
Okay. Next one is comment 6, and this one spans 4 slides.
Okay, thank you. Comment number 6. This statement supports a moratorium on any further land acquisition by eminent domain, any new runways, runway extensions, or any new hangar development at Maury Airport. I do not support any increase in the number of based aircraft or any increase in aircraft operations or larger traffic patterns resulting from faster or heavier aircraft at this airport, which is surrounded by a densely populated area comprised of residences, schools, playgrounds, and parks. Airports must be compatible with surrounding communities, maintaining a balance between the needs of aviation, the environment, and the requirements of residents. The most obvious result of increased activity of small piston-driven aircraft at Maury Airport will be an increase in the lead pollution that is currently present in the vicinity of the airport. It already presents a significant health risk, especially to children. In an extensive, widely cited study from Duke University, Marie Lynn Miranda, Rebecca Anthopoulos, and Douglas Hastings studied areas surrounding 66 airports in 6 counties in North Carolina using a geospatial analysis of lead levels in children. They found that there was a significant 95% confidence incidence of higher blood levels in children residing within 1,000 meters of the airport. The lead levels were even higher if the child's residence was within 500 meters of the airport. The study involved 125,197 children from 9 months to 7 years old, 13,478 of whom lived within 2,000 meters of one of the 66 airports involved in the study. The annual lead emissions from each of these 66 airports appear to have been no more than 1/4 to 1/2 of the current lead emissions produced by Maury Airport. Thus, children living within 2,000 meters of Maury Airport are undoubtedly exposed to several times the amount of lead emissions as the children in the study. We'll need to, yeah, thanks. Flip page. Thanks, I appreciate it. Continuing comment number 6. Over the last several years, there have been the addition of a second FBO-like based aircraft company at Maury Airport, Capital Flight LLC. Capital Flight relocated from the full-service Dane County Regional Airport only 9.9 miles from Maury Airport and duplicates many of the same services that were already being performed by Maury Airport Airplane Company. Capital Flight, however, uses louder, more disruptive, high-powered Cirrus aircraft. Capital Flight is selling, renting, and teaching with these louder Cirrus aircraft using leaded aviation gas. Capital Flight's relocation from Dane County Regional Airport to Maury Airport in July 2015 appears to be part of a push by the city of Middleton to change this airport from a recreational hobby airport into a commercial airport that would compete with the Dane County Regional Airport. Maury Airport is only 9.9 miles from Dane County Regional Airport, and Mead & Hunt's Chapter 2 forecast for Maury Airport does not support such a business plan for Maury Airport, nor suggest that it would be at all successful. This push for Maury Airport expansion is coming from a small minority of special interest individuals whose vision for the city is short-sighted and personally financially motivated. In the long run, and at best, this expansion would have only very minimal indirect benefits to the city of Middleton, but it would certainly exacerbate or increase the already serious environmental negative effects of the surrounding Middleton area community, including the towns of Middleton and Springfield. Continuing comment number 6. A majority of the AMPAC committee's membership, the Airport Commission, and the City of Middleton Common Council refused to acknowledge the current serious mobile lead aircraft emissions and other forms of toxic airborne pollution from Maury Airport aircraft, let alone the predictable increase in such toxic material that would come with an airport expansion. The lead pollution is airborne, and numerous credible medical and scientific studies have documented the detrimental effects of lead poisoning, particularly on children, for persons living and going to school in areas surrounding the airport. There are approximately 8 schools and at least 5,000 children whose health would be even more adversely impacted with more flight activity. There is no safe level of lead in humans. Lead in children is harmful at all levels, no matter how low. It affects intelligence, neurodevelopment, social skills, and memory. It can lead to a permanent loss in IQ. Studies have confirmed that ADHD is associated with blood lead levels at very low exposure amounts, even below 2.5 micrograms per deciliter. This is below the USA Center for Disease Control and Prevention's national accepted threshold of 5 micrograms per deciliter. These negative effects will continue into adulthood and include loss of earnings. It seems It seems inevitable, even under current circumstances, that many, if not all, of the children living within 1,000 meters of Maury Airport for any significant period of time will experience an increase in their blood lead levels. Once that increase occurs, it will be with the child for life, as there's no way to effectively remove it. And this is the final slide for comment number 6. The city of Middleton has recently supported the construction of many apartments and family residences in close proximity to Maury Airport. Many appear to be within 1,000 meters of the airport. All children living in all of these residences will be in a high-risk area and will be subject to a potential increase in blood lead levels on a daily basis. The parents of these children should be fully warned and advised that living near Maury Airport may present a serious risk to their children's health. This risk also extends to all other children who attend one of the several schools or who regularly use the parks, playgrounds, soccer fields, or other athletic facilities, all of which are close to Maury Airport. Maury Airport, in its current operational form, is a serious threat to the health and entire community, especially the children. Not only should it be expanded, the city's plan should be aimed immediately toward a removal of all lead-producing flights for Maury Airport. And that was from a Town of Middleton resident.
Okay, comment 7, and this one spans 2 slides as well.
Thank you. Comment number 7, we do not support expanding Maury Airport operations or its facilities. City of Middleton should honor its commitments in resolution 1008-20 intent for Maury Airport property to 1, restrict the west runway length to 4,000 feet, 2, not construct crosswind north-south runway, and 3, urge pilots to follow flight patterns over commercial and industrial areas and away from residential areas. Maury Airport operations and low altitude overflights already disrupt the densely populated residential areas, schools, playgrounds, and parks in the vicinity. This includes noise pollution and air pollution concerns. We are very concerned about the Maury Airport piston-driven aircraft leaded aviation gas emissions, particularly the adverse health impacts of lead emissions on children, such as permanent loss of IQ. Comment number 7 continued. We do not support building 100 by 100 hangars at Maury Airport, especially in the vicinity of the Highwood Circle Estates subdivision in the Town of Middleton. We do not support the city's use of eminent domain to take land, including prime agricultural land, from private property owners to expand Maury Airport. We do not support lengthening the paved 4,000-foot runway to the west. Maury Airport aircraft already fly as low as 450 feet over homes in the Bridle Ridge subdivision in the Town of Springfield. Even a 200-foot lengthening of the current 4,000-foot runway would result in aircraft flying below 450 feet over homes. Lengthening the west runway would increase the risk of injury to people on the ground that live west of Maury Airport. Also, the land elevations to the west of Maury Airport are significantly higher, plus there are ATC high voltage lines and towers located in this area. We do not support a paved runway to attract heavier commercial aircraft to Maury Airport, specifically the construction of a paved 3,000-foot, 4,000-foot, or 5,000-foot or longer runway to the north. The Dane County Regional Airport is only 13 to 14 miles northeast of Maury Airport and is available for use by commercial aircraft. We do not support eliminating 79% of the runway protection zone that goes to the south of Airport Road. Oh, sorry. We do support eliminating 79% of the runway protection zone that goes to the south of Airport Road, which puts about 10,000 vehicles per day using Airport Road at greater risk of injury from a Maury aircraft/vehicle collision. And this from a Town of Springfield resident.
Okay, slide 8, and this also goes into the second slide.
Okay, thanks. Comment number 8 is, I do not support expanding Maury Airport operations or facilities. The City of Middleton should honor its commitments in Resolution 1008-20 intent for Maury Airport property. I am concerned about the Maury Airport piston-driven aircraft leaded aviation gas emissions, particularly the adverse health impacts of lead emissions in well water and on children, including impacts such as permanent loss of IQ. I do not support building 100 by 100 corporate size hangars at Maury Airport, especially in the vicinity of the Highwood Circle Estates subdivision in the Town of Middleton. I do not support the City of Middleton's use of eminent domain to take land, including prime agricultural land, from private property owners to expand Maury Airport. I do not support lengthening the paved 4,000-foot runway to the west. I do not support any construction of a paved runway to the north to attract heavier commercial aircraft to Maury Airport. Specifically, I do not support the construction of any paved runway to the north. I do support urging pilots to follow flight patterns over commercial and industrial areas and away from residential areas. That's from a Town of Middleton resident.
And then the last comment we received by the deadline was comment 9, and this one was via phone.
Okay. Via a phone conversation with a clerk from the Dane County Land and Water Resources Department, 2 area farmers expressed their concerns about the potential extension of runway 119, severing Schneider Road and increasing the risk of flooding. So those are all of the comments that we received by the deadline, and I appreciate all of those who have submitted comments. I also appreciate all those who have stuck around on the call to hear those comments read out. I think, again, I'm going to end up, I guess, with other ways that you could participate. And a slide's on the screen, but I will read it again for those who might not be able to see it. It says, if you do not wish to speak during the open house or need to leave before you are called on, you may submit your questions or comments basically by Tuesday, April 20th, 4:30 p.m. You can reach out to us by emailing the project team at c29masterplan@meadhunt.com or by calling at 608-821-8394 or by submitting comments on a comment form available on the open house webpage. And it's also available at the airport terminal. Again, you get those questions and comments to us by April 20th at 4:30 p.m. And those will be acknowledged in a report prepared for the next Airport Master Plan Advisory Committee, or AMPAC, meeting. The report will also be made available on the master plan webpage and shared with city leadership for consideration in the final master plan recommendations. And just as a further attempt to reach out and get participation, the City of Middleton will also provide further opportunities for public input regarding the airport master plan, both at meetings and through distribution of a community survey prior to completion and adoption of the master plan. So I think this concludes our public open house today. I again appreciate everybody participating, and yeah, thank you very much. I think we can end on this note, and everybody have a wonderful weekend. And looks a little cloudy, but hopefully you can get outside and enjoy some weather this weekend. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.